Chapter 1, Reborn. As I am currently going to my job, when I look at the road I see a teenager with wireless earbuds pass at the crosswalk. I also see that a car is going towards her. Well, I would warn her, but she probably won't hear me, and then when she dies I will have to stay here for the ambulance because I called out to her. I would then be late for my job. Sorry, but today is a crucial day, I can't let that happen. Bam. She gets hit by a car. I don't look at her corpse from far away. After all, it would upset my stomach and I would lose some sleep, and that SHT is bad for my health. What a dumb bitch, she just died for such a dumb reason. What a dumb way to die. Anyway, after some time I arrived at the building where I work. The building is a skyscraper building. The company I work at is a $10 billion business. I am an associate senior engineer and soon to be senior engineer. Well, you might be wondering, how will I do that? Well, that might happen because the senior engineer might have been seduced by an underage girl when he was drunk, and I might have made the whole thing happen and even had someone call the cops when I put it in their mind that the girl looked way too young. I know the bastard old pervert will probably get away with just a slap on the wrist, that F***er is rich. But the company will still have to drop him, and who will get higher in the food chain? Me, baby. I am the most appropriate person after him, for the job. I have been working in this company for only 4 years, but I will finally be at the top, and with that, I will have certain control over the stocks and I will invest all my savings in it. Then I will get some great stocks and then lower the price by false information and buy all the stocks I can, and after that, I raise the price as high as I can, and I sell big. I have made all of the necessary paperwork for my defense and my lawyer. I trust him, he is an old friend that I met in college. I also ked his sister, not that he knows that. He told me I would have a better chance after I bankrupt the company. Ha 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 ha. I will soon become a millionaire. Okay, got to keep my facade of being a nice helpful guy who can't wait to gain recognition from everyone. I think I am getting hard just by thinking of how good I will k these people. Then as I go towards my office I see the hot blonde-haired and blue-eyed secretary. She looks at me with a worried look. I need ck to calm my brains, and who is better at that than my little cute secretary? Mr. Smith, you won't believe what is happening today, the senior engineer. I am about to say our secret let's k word. But then someone comes in through the front door and interrupts my thought process. No warning was there about what was about to happen next. How dare you do that to my daughter, you kers? Boom. The last thing I felt was the flames licking my body and then darkness. The last thoughts I could think was of how reckless I had been. My death had been my fault of carelessness. It's a boy, lady. What? Blurry? Oh. I see, so this was a second chance for me? I will never be so careless again. Year 267. It has been 8 years since I was born here, all of my rage that I had lost everything just because of a small mistake. It humbled me. Just assuming because the girl was a whore, her father was a deadbeat dad so much that he killed me. So here I am now, in a medieval world that is made even worse with inevitable doom. It already felt like a horrible death was a self-fulfilling prophecy for anyone in this world. Still, having been through a first life full of mistakes, I decided that from now on I will be extra careful. Especially in the world that I have been reborn. This new chance, even in a world like this, could make me happy. My new name was Arthur Frey, and I was one of the 30-something children that Valder Frey currently has. I have been careful to not be seen as a genius. Because babies with genius intelligence don't match up well in a medieval setting. Anyway, I have been trying to make myself seem a smart and curious child. Not too smart though. Also, my first words were father to try and get on Valder Frey's good side and kept bothering him when I was a kid. Even now I act like I want his approval, which I couldn't care less, all of this just so I can get some resources for my future endeavors and get out of this doomed house. Even if Arya didn't come and kill us, we would kill each other in a succession war amongst all the siblings. I was confident in winning the whole civil war thing in case it happened, but here, risking my life wouldn't be a good idea, especially due to how easily I could die. Hell, just a small scratch festering would kill me. Also heard that my new mother threw herself from a window or something like that. Well, it wasn't that important anyway. Though I did act as a good son and shed some crocodile tears for the woman who I didn't bother to memorize the name. During these 8 years, I didn't waste my time and trained with a sword since I was 4. Obviously, I was not stupid enough to fight in the front lines. Let the knights seeking glory do that, and then they will die like the useless tin cans that they were. Though the guards did say that I was a gifted swordsman. Not sure how true that statement was, since I am confident that beating other kids while I had the mind of an adult was easy. Mostly because they can't do a feint attack to save their life. Still, I have spent more time in archery, and that is a way more useful skill in this time period. After all, a good swordsman won't be able to kill 20 people, hell, I would bet Arthur Dane wouldn't be able to do that if they swarmed him. One could be as good of a swordsman as they wanted, but certain things just can't be overcome. An archer can do that though, as long as he was a good archer, was a long distance away and he had arrows. Plus the battlefield was safer in the back than in the front of an army. With Master Bam, I tried to learn the High Valyrian language. Even though the master is pretty incompetent by my standards, he still had knowledge that I needed, so I learned the basics of medicine, history, economy, and many other things that would be useful for my future. Especially medicine, since I won't be able to go to a pharmacy to get a bottle of antibiotics, so learning what that equated to in this world was best. For example, maggots could be used to clean a festered wound as they remove the dead flesh and cells around the wound. There were also so many procedures that could be done with hot wine and leeches. I have no idea how effective they were, but at least I won't die from a scratch, hopefully. Still, though, these 8 years of mine weren't wasted. Every day I became more prepared for the next. Though that still wouldn't stop a bandit's arrow from piercing my head if they decided that I looked too good for a Frey. It just took one arrow and I would be a dead man. At least I have even become a squire to my eldest brother and heir to the Frey family, Stavron Frey. I have been doing a good job, and as the heir, my brother has a lot of coins to go around. So many that even when I stole 2 gold dragons from his coin purse, he didn't notice. He didn't notice the 2 coins that he lost. He still had hundreds of them in his purse. I didn't take more because I don't want to break our good relationship if he gets suspicious. Wouldn't want to get killed because my brother considered me a thief, nor did I want to get my hand cut off. Valder might even send me to the wall. There were already too many Frey mouths to feed, so one of them going to the wall might make the money-grubbing Valder a little happier. When I came to this world I thought that one golden dragon had the buying power of $2,000-$3,000, but from discussions with the master it was more around $10,000-$12,000, so that meant that technically I had around $20,000 on me. Though I did spend my allowance of 1 silver stag a month since I was 5 years old to buy some medical equipment, herbs, and potions. After all, I don't want to die from blood poisoning or something stupid like that. Also 1 silver stag for the allowance of Lord's child is a small amount. I mean, even some landed knights allowed their children to have an allowance of 10 to 30 silver stags. I was Valder Frey's favorite child. Most of the others only get coppers. So that said a lot about the Freys, and that it's a health hazard to even be one. Anyway, with all these thoughts in my head, I need to go and meet up with my father for that new sword. Chapter 2, Bandits. When I went inside my father's office/lord's room, the place was as dreadful as the rest of this castle, with stone walls that seemed to depress even the most energetic of people. I can't wait till I get out of this death trap. Valder Frey looked at me and smiled, showing his yellow crooked teeth. Well, look who is here, my prettiest son. If your sisters were half as pretty as you, half of the 7 kingdoms would be begging us for marriage proposals. I smirked at his comment and sat down in the chair in front of his desk. One thing I noticed was that the whole chair seemed the same as father's, which wasn't so, as it had a lower proportion to make Valder seem bigger than he was. Also me, pretty? I would describe my looks as average at best, with black hair and dark eyes, a straight nose, and an oval face. Honestly, even in my last life, I used to be better looking and I wasn't anything special even then. But still, compared to a Frey, I was the most handsome Frey in the castle. There were still a lot of better looking servants than me in the castle, so that said a lot about Frey and what was considered good looking amongst them. I wondered if the other houses comforted their lesser handsome sons by saying something like, "At least you aren't a Frey." Honestly, wouldn't blame them. Some of my brothers have faces that not even a mother would love. All these idle thoughts went through my head in a split second as I smiled at my father. Well, now calling a Frey pretty is like saying that a Tully won't sell his children to the highest bidder. When he heard that, Valder's face changed into a frown, but then he smiled. Bahahaha, he laughed, "This is why you are my favorite child, Arthur. At least you have a sense of humor." I laughed along with him. Insulting a Tully was the best joke to Valder. Even though he was being a hypocrite. After all, he does the same to sell his kids and all that. Then as the cherry on top, I added. But it doesn't matter how you look if you are rich, isn't that right, father? After all, you already have had 4 wives, so that must mean you are the most handsome bachelor in the Riverlands. Ha 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 ha. This time his laughter was so loud that even the rest of the castle probably heard us. You should come to visit me more often, Arthur, you just made my day. Well, I will say whatever you want to hear, you whore-loving barbarian. After all, words were free, so why not use them as much as one needed to get people in an advantageous position to oneself? I still kept the smile on my face even while insulting this unwashed plebeian 100 times in my head. Well, I can't come here that often now that I am a squire. Oh yeah. I almost forgot. Father, can I ask you to get me a real steel sword now that I am a squire? He smirked at me and nodded. Take whatever you need from the guard's armory. I acted excited at that, got up, and went towards the door. Okay then, see you later, father. As I went outside I could faintly hear him saying with an amused voice. Not even saying a proper goodbye to his handsome father. As soon as I went outside the door I walked a bit and made sure that no one was looking at me. My excited act ended, and I have my natural cold-looking face. This new face was quite good because I had a natural cold appearance if I didn't smile, though as a kid that isn't gonna scare anyone. When I grew older I predicted that it would look more intimidating. Now that I have Valder Frey in my palm. I was probably his favorite son. I could guide the conversation, I could easily manipulate him up to a certain degree. Though these acts of mine won't work after my childhood is over. My biggest advantages were that I was a kid and had the facade of being a talented young man, though I had to still seem a bit naive sometimes. Wouldn't want to have any of my new brothers getting any ideas that I would be a competition to their rule. Keeping a good relationship with over 30 siblings wasn't easy. Were there more than 30? I never quite counted them, and the names I never bothered to learn of the less important siblings, calling them only brother or sister or other words that have that meaning. Year 273. Clung. My sword clashed with another of the squires. He was a couple of years older, but even though I was only 14 years old, modern body exercises kept me in a moderately better shape than most people of similar ages. We were fighting in the training grounds outside of the twin castles. Some Frey men were looking at us. Clang. The squire tried to hit me with his blunt sword at my side. I could already see his telegraphed moves. It was easy to predict what he will likely do next, where he will attack, the obvious feints and tricks with his sword. As he went to do an overhead slash at me, I positioned my clean sword to reflect the sun in his eyes, causing the squire to squint and be blinded for a split second. I then sidestep his slash and get closer to him in his personal space. I hit his sword holding his hand with the blunt side of my sword. Ouch! He yelped in pain, dropping his sword on the ground. I then punched him in the chin, and he dropped like a sack of potatoes, grunting and holding his mouth as blood came out of it. Seems like he bit his tongue. I almost felt sorry for the stupid young man. Well done, Arthur, that is the best swordplay I have ever seen, said my eldest brother as he clapped to congratulate me on my new victory. My eyes met his similarly dark ones and we smiled. Well, I could say that all Frey soldiers were terrible and very weakly trained. Or I could also have said that I used this time to spar because I knew the squires were either too drunk or tired. Instead of speaking my mind, going for the more diplomatic approach was better. Well, I had a good teacher. His smile widened. Your swordplay is perfect, but now you just need some experience. I will go hunting some bandits. You wanna join me? Well, this was interesting. My smile didn't slip out of my face as I answered him. Of course I will come, brother. Just give me some time to prepare. While there was no noticeable deception in his voice or body language. This was still a medieval world in Westeros, and him calling me to exterminate some bandits was a convenient way for me to have an accident. Well, if he tried anything then he would be the one having a so-called accident. I wouldn't mind killing a couple Frey if they got in my way. So I decided to get all my most loyal subjects. My most loyal friends were 11 Frey guards in total. They used to be some village boys that I met in the nearby village while buying some medical herbs. There was nothing special about them, neither were they too brave or strong, but they were mine and the people I had handcrafted to be my meat shields. I mean loyal friends. These guys used to be orphans in the village, nothing special. Orphans were everywhere in Westeros. With all the wars that went on in this place, probably half the lands were made of orphans. Still, these guys had no one that cared about them, and so I appeared like their savior. Even gave them an allowance back then and spent a lot of time with them, fed them while they were hungry, helped them when in need, even went to the trouble of socializing with them to create a sense of belonging, comradeship, and friendship. People always made it sound so easy to create a loyal person that will give their life for you. But humans always were individual creatures who only came together out of convenience, and each of them had hopes for the future and no one liked to die. Finding them wasn't hard since as Frey soldiers they were meant to guard one of the gates. There was nothing special about their looks, except their armor was better than most since I bought it for them. Oi! Guys! Come with me, we got something to do. I called out at them. They looked at me and smirked. One of them waved. Okay, coming right up. Whenever he calls us, coins are always following us, so we better go fast. Yelled out one of them, while rushing toward me. Good, their enthusiasm will be rewarded. Don't forget to notify some other guards to take over your past, I warned. General, third person, POV. After Arthas went to meet up with his brother, he noticed that his brother had 6 guards too, and they were all on horses, but so were Arthur and his men. Stavron Frey smiled. Well, I thought that you wouldn't bring guards, so I brought some even for you. This might be a little much for a small bandit group, but whatever, let's go. One can never be too sure, brother. Who knows how many of them could be there? After all, the small folk can rarely be counted on to say the real numbers, expressed Arthur, showing a little half-truth in the statement. The eldest brother on the other hand teasingly nudged him. Careful, Arthur, some might call us cowards on this. Arthur smirked. Well, cowards are known to live longer than brave men at least. Come on now, little brother, you can't be like Baristan the Bold if you act like this. I never wanted to be like him either. I don't quite see how being a glorified bodyguard would be good for me or my health. Plus King's Landing never was quite appealing, it would be like sticking my cock in a nest of vipers, even to the stupidest of men that wouldn't be good. Ha ha ha, Stavron laughed, well, as a King's Guard you won't get to stick your dick in anything, so I still don't see what the problem is. I would rather stick it in a viper's nest than in nothing, said Arthur jokingly, but really though, the last place I would want to be at is a King's Guard. Even more so than the wall? Inquired Stavron, amused at their little banter. Move being a King's Guard to the second worst position to be, he stated. They continued to banter all the way to the forest. Arthur, even though he had his guards protecting him, he was always cautious, if both threats outside his group and inside. Should we leave our horses here? Asked Arthur. We could. But why? Inquired Stavron. The younger Frey frowned as he looked around, his eyes narrowed at the shadows of the trees. Well, if we go in with horses they will hear us galloping and that would give them a chance to prepare an ambush. Plus horses don't do well on forests like there, if they trip in a tree root and land on top of us then we are done for. Also, they might get scared and run away uncontrollably. Stavron thought for a bit and nodded, seeing that his brother had a point. Plus horses were quite expensive and replacing them would have to come out of his pocket. A villager close by said that he had sighted them around here. How sure are you that this informant isn't working with the bandits to lead us in a trap? Stavron stopped in his tracks as he got out of his horse and tied his leash to a tree. I now see why Arthur is considered as quite the bright young man by Maester Bam. He pondered. I am not sure of that at all, so we better be on guard just in case. Okay, me and my group should take the rear in case of an ambush, Arthur suggested, your group also is generally better at close quarters combat. Stavron nodded and his guards smiled at the compliment that the younger Frey gave them. As they moved their guards around, Arthur now had a clear look of his brother's back, if he wanted, he could just pick up the bow he had on his back and it would be over for Stavron. It didn't take long to find the bandit camp, it was just a couple of tents in the middle of the forests. Their numbers should be small, but be on the lookout for more or a sneak attack, whispered Arthur, being as cautious as he could be. Stavron smiled proudly, while this was the first time Arthur was doing something like this, he still had everything covered and was careful, unlike some others his age who thought that only a swing of their sword was needed to end something insignificant like a bandit's camp. But even then, Arthur had some other thoughts that he didn't express. At least this means that one of the rival houses didn't pay them or paid them too little to wreak havoc in our lands. Well, let's go and kill them, said Stavron, puffing his chest with pride. Arthur looked at him with deeply hidden spite. Dumb as a rock, well, it was expected. Stavron wasn't the brightest of the Frey bunch. I have a better idea. The younger Frey suggested, being careful not to anger his brother or seem like he was insulting his intelligence. After all, an arrogant man is like a pufferfish, it always hurts those around him, even the ones who tried to save it. Well, we will follow your idea then. Since this will be more of a lesson for you. Stavron declared, it's your time now Arthur, show us that bright mind that the maester won't stop talking about. Arthur nodded, okay, I want you, he pointed at one of his guards that was a little smarter than the others, to go and act like you are lost and call out to them. Leave your sword behind, don't worry, we will have your back. What? The man swallowed hard in fear, he had done nothing like this before, can't someone else go and do it? Arthur frowned, 2 silver stags to the man who decides to go and do this for me. I will. Said the cowardly man who refused to do so before. The others also wanted to go too. No, fate favors the bold, you had your chance but you lost it now. Arthur put his foot down on this, also next time, I don't want to see your face and you will only get a quarter of what the others get. Wait, Lord Arthur, sorry about this I didn't mean it. I will do this for free, sorry, I wasn't thinking straight before. The man apologized profoundly, realizing that having a Frey be on his bad side wasn't a good thing. Especially Arthur, everyone knew he had Valder's ear in these matters. I will accept your apology, but you will still get only a quarter of the rewards. Next time make sure that you don't refuse my orders, no go out there before I decide to slit your throat. Arthur said coldly, his dark eyes seeming to look straight into the man's soul. The cowardly man nodded rapidly and went forward, leaving his weapon behind. Every man has his fears, they won't listen to someone like me just because I tell them to. Well, I built a friendship with him so he thought that defying me in front of these men was something he could do? Sadly for him, from now on he will be made an example of. Just because of my young age doesn't mean that they shouldn't listen to me. This is a medieval society, and might makes right. Contemplated Arthur, thinking about how to handle this situation. Still, he had his job to do too, so he went and climbed up one of the trees and pulled out his bow, and got ready to shoot. The cowardly soldier on the other hand was as nervous as he could be. He felt like everything was crashing down on him, his heart felt like it would beat out of his chest. Is anyone there? I am lost, can you help me, please? He yelled out, and his cries for help were quite truthful since he knew that he wouldn't be having a good time from now on. Who's there? Called out a voice from the tents as 6 people came out. They all had cheap leather armor and the one spoke seemed to have a better sword than the others. Arthur aimed and shot out his arrow straight at the leader. Fwish! It pierced straight through the eye of the one who seemed like the leader. The bandits looked around in shock, and before they could get out of their shock, another arrow came and hit another one in the throat. There is a bowman around. Be careful! Yelled out of the bandits, turning around to run away, but it didn't last long as an arrow pierced from the back of his head and came out of his mouth. His corpse plopped on the ground. She! Fwish! Another one gets hit through the eye, and by then the 2 bandits left had come to their senses and started to run off in the same direction. But it didn't last long as he was pierced straight through the heart. Surround him, don't let him run! Ordered Arthur, even though he could still shoot the last man down too, he had more use for him. With 17 chasing after him, the man didn't last long as he tripped and was caught. Then he was brought to Arthur who looked at the bandit with a strange gaze in his eyes. Well, then time for some experience. Thought Arthur, before taking out his sword. Take out your sword and fight me for your life, criminal, or my men will kill you. Chapter 3, Start of the journey. When the bandit saw that there was no other choice, he scrambled to grab his sword and looked at the people around him, all of them with their weapons out. Arthur smirked. If this was a battle, he would have attacked when the man went to grab his sword, but that wasn't the case here. He wanted to see how his swordsmanship would fare against a real opponent who wanted to kill him. Also, usually Arthur covered his arrows in a self-made paralysis poison, but today he didn't do so. Still, when he used that, even he had to be careful with his poison. Building tolerance to this poison or any poison was a hard thing to do. When learning this skill, Arthur had to be very careful. After all, if anyone got wind of it, they would think that he was planning to poison his siblings and get the twins as his inheritance. Of course, he would do something like that if the chance presented itself, but it was too dangerous at the time. Lord, please, let me go, I have a family. The man begged. Arthur raised a questioning brow. So did everyone else you robbed and killed around these parts? You didn't care about their families, why should I care about yours? Some of the guards were about to make some derogatory terms about the man's wife and how they would take care of her. But when they saw Arthur, their voices got stuck in their throat, remembering that he wouldn't like their guards to be undisciplined. If you fight and kill me, then my guards will let you go, Arthur told him. So come in now, let's fight, I don't have all day. The man had tears in his eyes and legs shook, and so he pulled his sword up to do an overhead slash and charged at the young man. Fwish! Arthur didn't let this chance go and threw a dagger at the man's throat, and the bandit, his eyes widened, and dropped the sword, his arm still up about to slash. Your slash was too far overhead, it would give you more power, but left your throat exposed, Arthur lectured the dying man, looking at him as his body slumped on the ground and the life fleeing his eyes. The dagger was still in his throat and blood seeped out of it. I see, this is the first time I killed someone in both this world and last. Though I killed this guy's companions by arrows, it was different. Or was it? He contemplated. After all, even as he saw the man bleed on the ground, he didn't feel anything special. He remembered that in his last life there were many stories about how people threw up and such. But no, he now saw that they were mostly stories because when he came to the forest, he knew what he came for and did it. True, the blood was a little off-putting at first, but with his mind already prepared for it, he didn't feel anything special. In the end, Arthur just shrugged. Well then, let's get their things and get out of here. To him, killing didn't feel special, he didn't feel bad, nor did he feel good about it. Just like any other action in the world. But Arthur did learn something today. I hate fighting honorably, or even fighting at all. No matter how talented people say that I am with a sword. This thing could have gone wrong in so many ways if these guys weren't panicked. Arthur considered with careful thought as he picked up the dagger from the bandit's throat and he pulled out a cloth from his pouch and started cleaning the blood off his weapon. Thankfully it hit with the sharp side, sometimes it's more of a fluke with these knives. A battle to the death wasn't about skill as much as it was about luck, so I will have to make myself the luckiest man in the world then. As his soldiers and Stavron went to ransack the tents, leather vests, weapons, clothes, and any loot that the bandits had, he couldn't help but imagine what war could be like. I definitely won't be fighting in the front lines of any war. Way too many things that could go wrong, or out of control. From a stray arrow, a random sword in your gut, falling on your sword, falling off the horse and breaking your neck, a small wound that could get infected and so much more. He envisioned carefully. Life was just too fragile, humans die too easily. After they packed the things from the bandit camp, they returned to the twins. Arthur of course rewarded all of his soldiers with 1 silver stag, which was around $50 in buying value. The one soldier who had disobeyed him had only earned a dozen copper pennies, enough for him to have some ale and get drunk. Well, in Arthur's opinion that was better than having his throat slit, which he would have had to do if the man hadn't come to his senses and followed his orders. Still, he must be made an example of. He muttered before walking into the twins' castle. Stavron waved him off with all the bandit loot. See you later, brother. The older brother had paid 1 gold dragon, 210 silver stags, for all the bandits' loot. Stavron would go and sell these things to a nearby merchant and get a bigger price for them. Arthur knew that but didn't mind it. The earnings wouldn't be anything above 300 silver stags. The guards were happy as each of them got paid 1 silver stag each for their troubles. They didn't even suffer a scratch, which was a good thing, and this coin is the same as their wage for weeks. Overall, Arthur considered this day to be quite productive. He thought about making this a regular activity, but in the end shook his head, dismissing the thought. After all, that was all very dangerous work. It went well today, but other days it might not. Rather, he planned to build some taverns around here. After all, as the travelers passed through the twins, they would need an inn or tavern to rest. It wasn't anything too big, but a good enough business venture that could earn him quite a lot of coin. Stavron Frey. Stavron would like to consider himself a good brother. After all, even with all the Frey children in the twins, he always made sure to have them taken care of. Any coin that they needed, he would offer them, of course not too much, but still enough for them to have some fun. As he looked down from one of the twins' castle's windows, he couldn't help but smile. While before outside of the castles the places were quiet, but a year ago, after a bandit hunt, his brother had decided to build some taverns around, and that had earned him the nickname Coin Fucker amongst the siblings. They joked that he would rub 2 silver stags together and make a gold dragon. At 15 name days, he had already earned so much. Valder Frey had even considered making him the Frey steward. The old man will piss himself to sleep when he hears about this, thought Stavron, knowing their father always favored Arthur. The boy was both smart and very good with a sword. He would be lying if he said that he wasn't jealous of his younger brother, but he kept these feelings to himself. Because even after all this, Arthur always was a loving sibling and even adored his siblings. Though he always was tough to the brothers, he would beat them to the ground during spars. But if you were his sister, Arthur would give you the stars in the sky if they asked him. Well, how is my favorite brother doing? Speak of the devil and she shall come. That was what Stavron thought as a smile came to him and saw Arthur smiling back. The younger brother had a growth spurt during the year, so he had grown almost as tall as his Stavron. Black hair and dark eyes, with a straight nose, he also lost all of his baby fat and started showing a strong jaw. Arthur's hair had also been cut very short so it couldn't be grabbed during combat. Hello there, Sir Arthur, Stavron called his brother jokingly, having knighted the young man recently. Sir Stavron, he bowed slightly with a smirk. Now as Knights of the 7 Kingdoms, should we see which one has the biggest sword? That's not very knightly of you. Stavron laughed, catching the innuendo his brother made. Arthur on the other hand shrugged. Well, we both know when it comes to swords, mine is the biggest in the twins. Well, you talk big, but never show it around. You want me to walk with my sword out? He asked with a mortified look. That isn't very knightly of you, it honestly makes you sound like a sword swallower. Stavron shook his head. You always had that sharp tongue on you, coin fucker. The younger brother pushed his chest up in pride. Well, what can I say, even non-living objects can't resist my charms. You know that this nickname was made to insult you, right? The Frey oldest child said. But the newly knighted shrugged. I know, but that doesn't mean that I have to take it as one. Ha, you and that thick skin of yours. Stavron shook his head in amusement. Then his look turned into a serious one and his eyes narrowed. What did father say? Well, he was mad that I would be moving away from the family to spread my wings. But we already expected that. He sighed, as he went to the window to look at the taverns that he had built. By the way, those things are all yours now, so take care of them and 20% of the earnings are paid to father as taxes. Also, Maria wanted a new necklace of the Twin Towers embroidered in it. Can you buy her that? Since I will be gone for a long time, I will miss many of her name days. Don't worry, I will take care of everything on this side. The older brother nodded. What about your men, how many are coming with you? Arthur frowned at this. Out of the 11 that I had groomed and helped with everything, only 7 agreed to come. Those ungrateful fucks. Stavron clenched his fist in anger. He knew that his brother treated those men very well. They should have all followed him to their deaths. Well, we will see how your lives will be without him around. Hey now, no need to be so angry. Arthur put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. And you aren't? Stavron fumed. After all you did for them. No, I am not, his brother nodded. I already expected something like this. Being angry at something you knew would happen is useless. I am still going to make them pay. Because while you aren't angry, well I am. Of course, Stavron knew just how much Arthur needed these men. And if his little brother died in his journey, these men who stayed behind shouldn't expect a painless death. Control your anger, Stavron, killing them would just be unnecessary trouble and a waste of time, Arthur reassured him, also I know where some of them are coming from. Since they have families and even children. I don't necessarily see that as against them. So what? Men go to war even when they have families. It's their duty to serve their lord. Stavron couldn't quite calm his anger, he knew just how dangerous going out there could be. Men, now calm down. After all, the men who came with me all have the best armor and horses that money could buy for them. Plus I even have a hedge wizard named Lion with me, he will take care of any injuries that we might get. Also, did you know that I thought he might really be a wizard at first, but in the end, he was just a healer. Arthur chuckled. That made me feel pretty stupid. This brought the older brother's anger down a little and he smiled. A hedge wizard is a Westerosi local or traveling herb doctor who also likely uses traditional healing. The small folk think some of them use spells and charms to heal the sick or help the needy. Which was probably just usual medication, but the peasants here think that that is magic, or it could be magic. Like hedge knights, hedge wizards are quite poor and sleep in hedges on occasion. They are most popular amongst the small folk as they are likely to be more affordable and accessible. Lion is a pretty skilled healer too. As good as Maester Bam or even better. Arthur reassured his older brother. Lords do not employ the services of hedge wizards as they see it beneath them. Stavron said, ask for a maester, he would be better, and if you offer them a huge sum of gold dragons, I doubt they would refuse. Plus, a hedge wizard isn't trustworthy. Stavron tried to refute and make sure his brother had everything before he even set foot off on his journey. At the mention of betrayal, Arthur's smile slipped out of his face and his dark eyes turned cold. The hedge wizard accepted my request when I asked him. I don't trust him obviously, but I know he is not stupid enough to betray me. Stavron nodded, deciding to trust his brother's judgment. He will be the first to admit, he had always been jealous of Arthur, and those feelings only grew as the years went along. But never hate, he could never hate Arthur, after all, he will always be his younger brother. The one who could have Valder even make him the next one to inherit the twins, but didn't. Just be careful out there. Stavron walked off after saying those words. Arthur too. I looked at my eldest brother's back as he walked away, his shoulders a little sullen down. He cared about me, I knew that much, but if I ever attempted to take over the twins, only a civil war within the family would ensue. Of course, the others might not see this, but it was as clear as day. Plus House Frey had always been too small for my ambition. In some years Robert's rebellion will come around, and that should be the right opportunity. Still, the current me wouldn't be able to get anything, I only have 40 gold dragons to my name and 7 well-armed soldiers. Pretty much nothing to change things on a grand scale. The taverns were a pretty good idea and more profitable than I thought. But it still wasn't anything special, I had no army to speak of, and while everyone who lived here saw these structures as my own, I knew that they really belonged to Valder Frey. The man will never achieve anything too big, my new father was just too cowardly to risk things and let go of some others. Similarly, I will have to leave behind these buildings and the security of a castle to go out there and make a name for myself. I am a coward, but everyone is a coward. Whether they admit it or not doesn't matter on the grand scale of things. Well, better get ready then. With that thought in mind, I got away from the window and went towards the stables where my men were waiting for me. When I got there, Valder Frey was there too, he smiled once he saw me. Finally you decided to show your pretty face. I smirked. What? Are you here to stop me, father? TCH, you are a grown man now. Plus wipe that smug look off your face before I wipe it for you. He said annoyed, but Valder was always annoyed at something. He then threw a punch at me and I grabbed it. Around 20 gold dragons by the weight and shape of it. There boy, don't go around saying that your father is a penny pincher now. Also, don't be stupid and try to be a hero. After saying what he had to say, father walked away. If I didn't know better, I would almost think that he cared about me. At least the time I spent manipulating his feelings didn't go to waste and got me 20 gold dragons. Also, I didn't need him to tell me to not be a hero because there was no way that I would endanger my life for stupid things like honor, oaths, or chivalry. Though I also wasn't stupid to say something like that out loud, unlike my father, he just loved shaming himself and showing how little honor he had. The Starks were stupid at the Red Wedding. Catelyn too, trusting a man known as being without honor. The whole Stark family had no one else but their stupidity to blame for their demise. Ned's honor made him go south when he knew that Starks don't do good out here. Though I guess I shouldn't expect anything too much from people who were born in their positions and didn't earn it. Still, I will have to be on guard against these people if I don't want a knife on my back from my most trusted ally. Anyway, enough thoughts about these things, it's useless worrying about other people when I can't even guarantee my safety. But I will have to learn from their mistakes. For example, never trust anyone just because they gave you guest rights by bread and salt. Also, I should do the same thing the Freys did in the show if it's beneficial. Though I will have to be better about it. Don't want words like that flowing about me. Where will we be going, Seer? Asked Lion, my healer. I looked at his thin frame, brown hair and eyes and smiled. The Reach, that place has tourneys quite often. Though I said that, the real destination was the wastelands. More specifically Lannisport. But this all needed to be kept under wraps, not even my traveling companions needed to know. Well, let's set off then. Are you all ready? Yes. Even though we traveled as fast as we could. It still took 20 days to reach Lannisport. Thankfully halfway we met some merchants who were going the same direction, so we went with them. Plus this acted as a way to make it seem like a spur-of-the-moment decision to my men. Which was good, because I don't want any of them to know what I will be doing. Trust isn't worth much in Westeros, so keeping my cards close to my heart was the best. As we arrived at the port town, I had to admit, the place looked pretty good. Better than the twins at least. Once there, we got some rooms in a relatively clean inn. My companions all got some rest as they laid down in their beds. But while they rested, my body, though tired from sleeping in tents in the ground, I was still quite energetic, and this was the best time to do the thing I came all this way for. Guys, I am going sightseeing. Really, after all this traveling, aren't you tired? Asked one of the guards. I just smirked at him. Well, I am not an old man like you. He laughed also and waved me away. Yeah, we know, just let old men like us rest. Do you need guards? No, I said before walking out and checking my punches. I had 41 gold dragons, around 50 silver stags, and 10 pennies. When I went outside I covered a little of my face, not enough to be suspicious but just enough to make people confused about my identity, just to be sure. While walking down the town roads I saw a bard and went towards him, putting all of the pennies in my pouch in front of the man. Do you know the Rains of Castamere? I asked him. He looked at me, smiled, nodded, and started to play his song. Oh, who are you they? After he finished the song, I smiled politely at him and said. So I am new at Lannisport, tell me, are there any interesting things around here? Well, of course Ser. The man nodded thankfully. 10 pennies would be able to feed the man for a whole day. I am no Ser, call me Andy. I come from the Reach. Lying through my teeth I told him my fake story. Not even a trace of what was about to happen must be spread. Even if someone saw something strange, all hints I gave will point in different directions. Because while I spoke like someone from the Riverlands, my armor was made like someone from the Stormlands, and I said this bard will know I came from the Reach. Well, Andy, there is a lot of interesting stuff going on in here. And so the man started explaining to me some things. And then there is the witch, Maggie the frog in the forest. It is said that she lives in a cabin and eats children. After some more talking I thanked him and turned in a corner before changing turns and going towards the forest. Without him seeing me. When I arrived in the forest I drew my sword and checked my backup knives which I had hidden in my lower back. I went towards the forest as I got deeper and deeper inside. I finally spotted a small hut that seemed to be covered by dirt with a straw door. This should be the place. Opening the straw door and going inside, there I saw a woman with long dark hair and a little bronzed skin. She had black lines under her eyes. The lines may be makeup or not. She also seemed to be sleeping on a chair that bobbled slightly. This was the Witch of the Westerlands. It seemed like she was the TV version, not the old and warty witch from the books. Well then, I could work with this. Maggie. Are you here? Come out, Maggie. I called out, and the sleeping woman's eyes suddenly opened. Chapter 4, Love and Betrayal. Arthur 3. As the eyes of the woman sitting in the chair opened wide, she looked at me in panic and looked at my drawn sword, then she started yelling. Get out of here. Maggie got out of her chair and came towards me, intending to push me out of her shack. In response to that I just put my sword back in its sheath and grabbed the woman's hands by her wrists. Excuse me, my lady, I apologized to her, I didn't mean to frighten you. I was searching for an evil witch in these parts. You wouldn't happen to know where she lives, do you? I asked her, feigning ignorance. Once she heard that, Maggie looked me in the eyes and I held her gaze. An unknown emotion passed her eyes before she calmed down. Since it seemed like she wasn't going to attack me, I let go of her hands. She turned around and sat down on her chair. Well, you are looking at her, boy. As expected, magicians were also humans. There was no need to fear them, after all, they were human, meaning they could also be deceived. I just smiled at her gently. That is funny, my lady. But I am searching for a witch. I heard that she hunted children. Also, my lady, living here alone in the woods is not safe. She then was about to laugh but covered her mouth with her hand. That is right, be entertained, you whore. Think of me as a naive young man. I thought but didn't show that in my face and just looked at her worried. Are you okay, my lady? He. Small chuckles and quiet laughs escaped her as she tried to hold back. Are you okay? I asked her again, with a worried look on my face, trying to display how naive I was. When Maggie heard what I said, that her body shook uncontrollably and she couldn't hold back any longer. Ha 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 ha. She just burst out laughing. Then she calmed down, but still with a smile on her face. You are entertaining, pretty boy. I had to hold my breath to force my face to blush a little. Thank you for the compliment, my lady, but I am a knight, not a boy. Her smirk widened even more once she heard that as she played with her hair and her hand was at the corner of her lips. Maggie then got up and came close to me and put one of her hands on my cheek. I had to hold myself back from stabbing her in the throat with my knife. Her face got closer to mine and she whispered in my ear seductively. Yeah, but, have you ever even had a woman boy? She said the last word passionately. But she wasn't wrong. In the world I was still a virgin. There were many reasons for it. The most important thing was that I didn't want a bastard yet. That would ruin my plans. I also was not a person in my first life who can't control himself in front of women. Keeping those urges in control was easy. I just used my hand if necessary. Anyway, now let my journey to learning magic begin. The defiance of Duskendale was what everyone was speaking about now. It has been a year since I and Maggie started our friendship. I am now 16 years old, pretty much an adult ready for marriage on this world's terms. I have gotten to know Lannisport better this past year and was eating dinner at one of the high-end restaurants. As I ate some steak, my mind couldn't help but wonder about my plans and how learning from people's mistakes will be crucial to survival. I was planning to stay far away from the Duskendale and the Crownlands. It's not my time to step into the spotlight yet. I didn't have enough power to do anything, and only fools do things on blind hope and without thinking them through. Robb Stark won every battle he fought, but he lost terribly in the end. Why? Because he didn't think things through. He was a man who let those around him dictate what he was and what he wanted. His subordinates made him king of the North. That right there killed Robb. It's the moment he became a dead man walking. Didn't he think about Stannis? His bannerman? Who would sell him food if he isolated the North from the rest of the realm? Also, why the hell would he marry some no-name girl? Was it love? Hell no. He was a teen when he got married. They could have likely grown distant years later. That was how relationships work. Plus, if they had survived, Robb would be under a lot of stress. War was one thing, but governing a huge realm is a whole other deal. His army was without rations. He didn't allow pillaging like the Lannisters. He wanted to keep his honor so bad. What did that honor do in the end? Kill his wife and unborn child, his mother's throat slit, his sister brutally raped by Ramsay. All that for what? Well, it wasn't all his fault. Ned was up there too. Raising his son to be honorable after what happened to his father and brother? Honor was what got them burned by the Mad King. I shook my head out of these thoughts. In the show I liked the Starks quite a lot. Even admired the likes of Eddard and Robb, loved their characters. But here, when this all became reality. Yeah, it became a whole other deal. ***. If I remember correctly, the incident of Duskendale was about how Lord Darkly of Duskendale refused to pay his taxes. Aerys resolved to deal with the problem himself without Tywin's aid and was captured like the stupid king he was because he went into the home of a desperate man to talk things out. No wonder he will get overthrown in a rebellion that barely lasts 1 year. The rebellion had everything against Robert's side. If only Aerys was sane, he could have crushed them. Well, enough of boring stories that probably won't lead me anywhere. The real problem was how could I turn this Duskendale incident into something profitable. As I racked my brains on this, I couldn't come up with something on the less dangerous side. So in the end, I decided to not take part in this. After all, Aerys could see this as me being part of the plan because of my profiting. Yet, I ain't reckless enough to do something like that. The Mad King even knowing that I exist at all would be a bad idea. If something like that happened, I will be taking the fastest ship and going to Essos. Probably somewhere around V's Dothrak. That place would be good to lay down till the rebellion. After all, no one can bear steel in there, and every Dothraki will be acting as my guard because as soon as someone pulls out steel they will be killed. Damn, why am I even thinking about escape plans? Hopefully, I don't have to do something like that. After all, during the year, I participated in any tourney that was available in the Westerlands. They are mostly small ones with the reward being around 50 or 100 gold dragons. I also won every one of them, so I got a little fame for myself. Of course, the winnings weren't always honest. Okay, no need to lie to myself. Most of my wins weren't honest. I was good with a sword, but that's about it. I wasn't Arthur Dayne of the King's Guard. Almost every tourney that I took part in, my strong opponents. Like the Mountain, the man is a beast and I would never fight him in a field that would resemble a fair fight. The last time I fought him, he had enough laxatives in his body to put down 5 men. He fought well and got defeated even better by me. That was when people started noticing me after I easily took down the Mountain. The serving girls will do a lot for a gold dragon, and I mean more than serving people under the table. No one would suspect dear Bessie to do anything like that. Also, even the way I fight against some skilled knights plays to my advantage. The best tactic against any knight in armor, which was pretty much every knight. I learned that the best strategy was to throw dirt or sand at their helmet, it will get through their holes in armor that they used to see. Then they can't scratch eyes due to the helmet, but my technique doesn't end this as a kick between the legs as hard as I can. That will send even the strongest man tumbling on the ground. Now the enemy is blinded and on their knees. Sure, some knights might boast about their fearsome skills with a sword. But none of them would have a high chance of beating me in a fight, especially when I use my technique for the first time. In the end, by using these tactics I had won every one of those tourneys. Sometimes by secretly putting a poison that dulled the senses in my enemy's drink when I was meant to fight against an opponent I wasn't confident in winning. Having to use poison on some tourneys that I didn't take part in were complicated phases. After all, this had to be done for no suspicion to raise about my involvement in the matter. The Honourable Sir Arthur would never do something as dishonourable as use poison and cheat in most of his fights. That's what I wanted people to think about me. Also, I made quite a name for myself as a knight. They call me the undefeated Arthur Frey. More like a joke in the beginning because I kept betting on myself to win. But eventually, it started becoming a legend. I had a hand in the rumors too, of course. After all, I never planned to risk my life for glory, rather preferred the smart way of doing things. Gold can be amazing for such things, people won't care if those rumors are true or not and they won't be able to refute them anyway, so it didn't matter anyway. Though they have a truth to them, I never lost in any melee fights or any archery tourneys. I haven't participated in any justing yet. Though I was training my horse riding skills in preparation for this. After all, I was a lover of fanatical stories. Something like being called the undefeated brings me great pleasure. Not enough to get me hard on my success but still able to get me semi-hard. Also, Maggie had been convinced to teach me blood magic in the end. Though it still took quite some time to do so and required a heavy amount of seduction. She saw magic as a burden that people hated her for. So because I loved her I will bear this burden together with her. She taught me blood magic and even a little divination, though the latter was like a buggy game and a double-edged sword. Knowing the future sometimes might set in stone as your fate, and trying to avoid your fate would complete it. Future sight sometimes doesn't even work, hell, it's also confusing as hell too, like riddles and representations. As a man who doesn't believe in superstition, this branch of magic was quite hard to change my mindset to suit it. Usually, I forget it after reading someone's fate, I read Maggie's once since one can't read his own fate. What I saw was a bloodied hawk tearing out her heart, but the same bloodied hawk couldn't fly anymore as it suddenly aged and was thrown in the water by an unseen bird. What did that mean? I have no idea, though I suspected that it showed Maggie's death. But it could mean heartbreak or something similar. But I told Maggie a whole different thing, that I saw a frog swimming happily in the water accompanied by a lot of larvae. I played with my food absent-mindedly as my mind went into these thoughts. By now I had learned everything I could from Maggie, so it doesn't matter if she died. Magic was pretty bad in this world, and nowhere near as useful as I hoped it would be. In battle, it didn't offer any advantage whatsoever. Plus no one must learn of it or all of my plans would be ruined, no one liked a magic user, not even other magic users. Probably would get burned to death by some religious guy, or a lord might use my possession of magic as a reason to kill me. By now Maggie no longer had anything to teach me anymore. I could confidently say that my magic usage would be better than hers. But I used the thing very sparingly, as magic never came for free. Magic required sacrifice. Sure, there might be some loopholes in divination magic that I could use, but in no way will I try to use them. Who knows what the repercussions of using them might be? Some more experimentation is needed to see how this thing could be used to my advantage. Because so far magic won't be too much of an advantage in anything. I and Maggie fucked a lot of times. Her husband had an accident, he got too drunk one night, fell on the sea and drowned. Really tragic that one, but he had to go because divorces aren't a thing in this world. Also better to visit Maggie one last time before I had to continue with my plans. A certain little gold kitten should have visited Maggie or will visit her soon. The hardest thing in learning magic from Maggie is to keep people from suspecting me of knowing it or finding out about it. After all, a secret is no longer one if two people know about it. Would you like some ale? A serving girl asked softly. She was smiling at me sweetly, and she had quite a pretty face and long blonde hair. This was very common in Lannisport. I smiled at her, no, thank you. Water will be good enough. She nodded, though I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Both because I didn't get the ale and never even made any signs of wanting to screw her brains out. I wouldn't mind doing so, but sex can wait, I have more important things than my lust. If Maggie found out that I did something like being unfaithful to her, it would ruin my plans. Doing something like that just to get a new tight hole to fit my junk in would be the height of stupidity. I got up and left, not waiting for the water. Still, though, I did leave a tip for the waitress. When I went back to Maggie's hut I found her as always in her chair knitting something. She noticed that I was back and smiled lovingly at me. "Welcome home," she greeted me. I just looked at her and asked. "So anything new?" She stopped knitting. "Yeah, I am worried that I might have to move away." I told the fate of a Lannister girl. I think it was bad because she splashed me with a drink on my face and ran away. Oh, so it was a prophecy that Maggie said but couldn't remember. I got close and kneeled in front of her. I gently grasped her face in my hands. "So you are not hurt, right?" She smirked at my worried face and leaned her head on my palms, feeling safe in them. "I wouldn't mind being splashed a couple times more just to see you make this face." I shook my head and smiled. "You are being silly, the last thing I would want is you being hurt." Her gaze caught my eyes and a mischievous glint appeared in them. "Mag, you haven't told anyone about me, have you?" I asked her in a serious tone. "Of course not," Maggie answered without missing a beat. I then gave her a deep one-armed hug and I put my other arm behind my back. I took out a knife which I held in my lower back. "And keep my arm behind my back." "I see." Fwish. Then I quickly slashed her throat. Blood spilled out of her throat, her eyes wide as she looked at me in shock, betrayal and sadness with a smidgen of anger. It seems like she is in shock. Oh well. I ready my knife again. Squish. And I stab again in her eye socket and twist it, killing her. I was not going to leave any loose ends. Maybe the chance might have been low due to the love she held for me, but why take the risk? Chapter 5, Fight of the Flower Knights. I looking at Maggie's dead body, my hand went towards a small pouch in my waist and I took out a cloth and started cleaning the short blade that I had used to kill Maggie. Her dead eyes were still open in shock and seemed to stare out into open space. If it wasn't for the slit throat and the slow coming paleness of her face, one could have mistaken her for alive. Maybe she was alive. I wondered but knew that blood magic was dangerous and in this world, people could be revived. I knew the woman down in front of me would never see the light of day again. Her death would be absolute, and her body would be burnt. I wasn't taking any chances on the matter. None of that mattered now, but what did matter was my next step. Should I go to the Vale? There would be Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. It would be good to meet the young men soon to establish a good relationship. No, it would be too soon to do something like that, this year wouldn't be the best either. So instead, I should go south. I need to go south to the Reach, the place where knights prance around in tourneys. Will have to win me some glory there too before I start enacting a main plan to power. Also, the Reach is the place where if a couple of people went missing, no one would notice. After all, everyone is distracted by the tourneys. Having learned the most theoretical part of blood magic, now I need to get down to the practical part, and that requires the sacrifice of life and flesh. Something that I wasn't willing to do in this place. After all, Tywin isn't a good target to get on the bad side of. General POV. It took Arthur Frey 2 weeks to reach the Riverlands. He had decided to go on a little detour of the lands. The first detour he took was to the Riverlands. After all, that was the place where his father's banners rested. He would never call the place home, but it still was the land that he knew the best. Arthur knew the people here. They were all a little not learned in his eyes, fighting for a land that will always be in the middle of the conflict. If the small folk knew of the lands outside their villages, then they would go and live in the Reach, where food is plenty and no real war will take place on their lands. Unlike the Riverlands, where every single major war had ruined the lands. Still, though, the political side of things and the suffering of people other than him didn't matter. Though if they were his people, then he wouldn't let them suffer, because who knew when the next war came around, or a revolution. Being needlessly cruel to those below you was stupid. People in power could never understand how the weak fought. That was the weakness that Arthur wanted to avoid at all costs. Thankfully, in his previous life, he always had been at the bottom of society. Only due to his shrewdness was he able to climb up the social ladder. As he rode toward a walled city, he smiled. "Come on boys, we have arrived at Stony September." Arthur lets his men go and rest while calling over the healer. "Let's go to a tavern. There has to be some news about the happenings around here." The healer lion nodded and came with him. "Yes, lord. No need to speak like the small folk here and no need to call me lord either," Arthur said as he walked in tow with his healer. Usually why he had his subordinates talk with small folk so no bandits would attack them at full power. After all, not only do lords have riches, but they also had trained men. So anyone attacking those kinds of people would be able to kill Arthur's entourage without difficulty. But while in cities, he didn't like his subordinates usually calling him lord. Because that would attract all different kinds of attention, plus it wasn't like bandits were forbidden in town. Most of them were unknown since they killed anyone who saw them. Also seeing some lord with so few guards might give men enough bravery to attack him for his riches. Still, though, he entered the tavern and acted as if he belonged there. "Can I get a mug of ale and a chicken?" "Yes sir," he waved the serving girl off before she could say anything anymore. He knew that while most inns worked like normal inns, the real profit came from the prostitution on the side. Usually, the owner's daughter or wife would spread her legs for some no-name knight that might visit this place. It wasn't a good life, so what? At least they earned some money from this instead of the knight breaking his daughter's face and then raping her. The world wasn't kind, Arthur knew that. So living in this world as a good man is like playing a game in hell mode. There was no place for needless kindness. Though stupid cruelty was also not a smart thing, you don't want people to hate you so much that they would give their lives to kill you. Still, though, Arthur amongst all the noise around him concentrated on any useful news the men were talking about. Didn't you hear? Some men have been forming a bandit group around here. The Lord has declared that he will capture them before the Night's Watch comes around in the next cycle, said one of the men in the tavern. His hoity voice showed that he was drunk. Seems like the Night's Watch will get its new group of thieves and rapists. Well, Lord Smallwood doesn't have a lot of time for that, a week at best. Hey! They are just some bandits in rags and kitchen knives, I doubt they could even last a day against well-armed knights. So what? Even a knight in full armor can be killed with a kitchen knife if the blade stabs in the right place. Hearing this, Arthur immediately thought of adjusting his plans. But that wasn't a desirable outcome. Also, he planned to have some blood rituals done soon, he couldn't dwindle around here anymore. Still, though, he knew when a dangerous situation was about and how to dodge these pitfalls in life. After all, if he went and recklessly traveled, just one wrong move and he would die. Unlike movies where enemies attack one by one, in reality, they all attacked at once and humans didn't have eyes on the back of their heads. Even the best swordsman could be killed by 4 competent men. They don't even have to be good at using weapons, just be competent with them. That's why Arthur had plans for a blood ritual to be made soon. Because while it wouldn't make him someone unbeatable, he hoped that this would help him at least not die a dumb death for some dumb reason. Like a drunk farmer suddenly butchering him with a pitchfork. Still though, with these thoughts in mind, Arthur couldn't just roll over and let things happen slowly. After all, there were benefits to be had here. Excuse me, good sirs, Arthur interfered to 2 of the men talking on a table in a slurred manner, showing that they were drunk already. They looked at him with annoyance, but Arthur's friendly smile seemed to wash away any annoyance they might have. Or maybe it was the nasty long sword on his back. Sorry for interrupting your drinks. I will buy you 2 mugs of ale as compensation. He half-heartedly apologized while offering the men new drinks. This made the rugged-looking me smile a little. That's good of ya. I guess polite men aren't a thing of legend anymore, said the other man, while this one seemed rugged too. As Arthur looked closer he noticed that this man had experience dealing with nobles. What can I say? Mama raised me to be polite to strangers. Who knew, maybe they would be polite to you too, Arthur mentioned. If the good people of the 7 aren't here to help each other out, then this world would surely be a bleaker place. Ha 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 ha, you're right there lad, said the drunk rugged man. Well, so can you be polite to me for another 2 mugs of ale? I am sure the serving girl can accommodate. Arthur smiled. I am quite curious about these new bandits and how the town planned to deal with it. Did the Lord say anything about it? The other less rugged drunk man chucked. Lords? They couldn't give a rat's arse for. Happens down here. Those lords think of themselves so high in the sky that they can't even see the little folk like us. Sometimes it's good for certain businesses. And small-time bandits like this thrive on these blinded lords, right? Jokingly added Arthur, making the men chuckle. Still though, I heard that some kind of local militia was being formed to combat the bandits. What's that about? Oh, you know, the town people have rallied together to kill the bandits. Still, though, I wouldn't trust these 2-bit people with forks to go about killing bandits. One of those scrums could get rid of the whole of them. Arthur chuckled at the mention of the joke. He knew that the man before him didn't know shit about battles, yet had the balls to insult others. Small folks, no matter how untrained, can be dangerous once you put a sword in their hand. Anyone can be dangerous with a weapon though. It took about 10 minutes for Arthur to get the information that he wanted out of the drunk man. It was quite tiring. But he needed the info so he wouldn't go into any situation blindly. Going in without a strategy was what got people killed. But still, Arthur thought about what he should do when he thought about looking for a pet shop around here. It didn't take long for him to find a pet shop. It had dogs, cats, owls, even ravens, and other birds. Arthur wasn't interested in any other thing and instead looked for a hawk, one that he easily got. It was a normal brown color and nothing seemed special about it. Well, it didn't need to be special for what Arthur had plans to do with it. Still, though, such things require meticulous planning and must be kept under wraps. As Arthur planned all of this, his eyes shone with malicious intent, a plan slowly forming in his mind on how to use this situation to his advantage. He looked around and saw many beggars on the streets, something that wasn't uncommon in any city. Especially in a medieval world like this, many war veterans were maimed and couldn't support themselves. So Arthur, with a smile on his face, approached the men. Excuse me, I have a friend who is writing a book about war. He is willing to pay 10 coppers for any injured veteran of war, so who would be willing to take the offer? We even have bread, don't worry, we will offer you all salt and bread as your guest writes. A couple of hours later and corpses of homeless men were skewered in the outskirts of the town, in an abandoned warehouse. Arthur had surveyed this place over a dozen times and even bribed some of the guards to be a little laxer on their patrols for the day and they could go and get some ale with the money he gave them. Arthur didn't care about guest rights or any other tradition of a savage world. He would rather look after himself and make a situation beneficial by abusing these people's naive following of tradition. The corpses were over a dozen and there was barely any light in the warehouse. A strange pattern had been drawn on the ground by using the blood of the corpses. It looked like a star with a reverse question mark in the middle with a circle encompassing them all. Arthur then put the hawk that he had put to sleep in the middle and whispered under his breath in a strange language. The blood then floated from the corpses, turning them all into empty husks, with no blood left in their bodies as it floated away from their cut necks. The blood all floated towards the hawk and seemingly got absorbed by the creature, which turned slightly larder. Its feathers turned red and its beaks black as coal. The hawk's eyes suddenly opened and they were white and looked at Arthur. But he on the other hand was standing still and his eyes were closed. Currently, while Arthur could still move his own body, no longer was he seeing from his own eyes. This ability was similar to skin changing, though Arthur didn't have the talent for the northern magic skill that was inborn in 1 in 1,000 people. Still, though, that didn't change anything for ambitious people like Arthur, as an ability useful like this wouldn't be able to escape his grasp. And once he opened his eyes, Arthur's smirk widened even further. Finally, he had something to call a special ability. A skill that could give him an advantage against other people and usable in a fight. Chapter 6, Fight of the Flower Knights 2. Arthur POV. I now have a blood animal familiar. It wasn't like your average animal companion, like the Stark's dire wolves. This blood ritual allowing me to see from the hawk's eyes is only a bonus because its real ability was something different. I concentrated and suddenly my vision changed, even though there was very little light around I could see through the cracks in the ceiling every detail on them. A hawk-like vision was my new ability. Nothing special, just enhanced vision to be as good as a hawk's, maybe a little better. Now, this might not seem much but coupled with my archery, it becomes something incredible. I can't measure exactly, but hawks can see small details in their prey even from 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile, away. So pretty much, no bows in this age could even shoot that far, meaning within my zone I would be able to snipe people easily. Though I will need some practice first since I had never shot so far before. When a reliable accuracy chance is made, then the bow's range around me will become a death zone for anyone who decided to attack with melee weapons. I was far from being invincible in battle or anything like that, but now I at least had some comfort at being able to kill some people and not be scared by some no-name bandits. Now I had something that gave me an advantage, especially seeing how many fighters the opponent had. Being able to see through the eyes of a hawk was useful too, even if it was just a side effect of the ritual. 3 days later, and the bandits were all eliminated single-handedly by me, Arthur the Unbeatable. A title that would change as soon as I lost in battle, but something like that wouldn't happen anytime soon. After all, killing over 20 bandits by myself was quite the feat. Of course, people might be imagining some battle where I used skills never seen before. But the reality of it was that I picked them up one by one, killing them from a distance with guerrilla warfare. Never even meeting one of them in close combat. Of course, the bards sang about my legendary skills with a sword and how I slid the bandits that way, which is perfect for me. Because the fewer people know about my skill set, the better it is. Also, while experimenting, I discovered many things about my new ability. And it was way more useful than something like flame resistance, which is rarely ever useful. But my Hawkeye ability could be used in every situation. Even close combat allowed me to see better and react faster due to how I catch on small visual hints before an attack even happened. A twitch of the shoulder armor is enough to show me how and where the slash will go. Still needs some work to stop myself from reacting to feint attacks too. But that will take some time to get at such a level. Still though, one-on-one, I doubt attacks will take me by surprise. Everything would be within my sight. Still, arrogance has been many people's downfall, so I don't want to be one of those losers too arrogant to recognize my mistakes. I understand that I am nowhere near invincible and can easily be countered if not careful. But for my fighting style, these abilities are way better than fire resistance of the Targaryens. General POV. In the Reach, a place known for its big yields in food and a huge army. Mace, the Lord Paramount of the Reach, looked with excitement at the tourney grounds. He had heard Arthur Frey had come to participate in the tourney, and that was something big. Recently the man had been to the High Tower and visited the Citadel. The unbeatable Arthur, they say that no matter what fight, no matter the numbers, Arthur Frey would win. That title still stood strong, meaning that the man still hadn't lost in a fight. He had built something like a legendary reputation. Ladies and gentlemen, after the axe throwing we have the melee. The announcer yelled out. Everyone looked at the fields and tried to spot a shield with a red hawk on it. And there it was, in a confident stride, a fully armored Arthur Frey came up. He looked at the stand Mace Tyrell and the Lord Paramount waved excitedly like a young child meeting his superhero in real life. "Pipe down you buffoon," said Olenna, looking at her son in disappointment. "Stop making yourself look like a fool. You are a Lord Paramount, not some maid who wants to get on the sheets with a knight." Mace flushed in embarrassment and sat down with a shameful look. This made Olenna snort in annoyance once again. She wished her son at least had a backbone to fight back against her. But he didn't have that either. What a disappointment, thought the old Queen of Thorns. Normally she wouldn't attend tourneys, she found them boring, to be honest. Yet, this tourney had a special person joining in. She couldn't help but contemplate about such a man. The undefeated, the bloody hawk, they call him many names. Except for Frey, it was as if he wanted to distance himself from the family, so what's his goal? What's he reaching at? Ever since he had come to the Reach, he hasn't even entered a brother once. One might suspect that he would be into men, but in the Reach, there were brothels for that too. Yet he didn't enter those either. Arthur Frey was quite a dilemma to Olenna Tyrell. He was building a fortune by winning tourneys, one after the other. Some even joked that as long as he was in a tourney, then it was better to aim for second place. First place was already stamped for the undefeated man. Still though, that fortune, where was it going? Even while he had been in the Reach, Olenna had no idea where Arthur's money went. Normally a man who lived by the sword would be wasting his gold in feasts and women. Yet he wasn't. At the same time, by now Arthur had earned so much gold that he couldn't just keep bringing it around with him sneakily. But that was it, even in the Reach where Olenna had many spies on Alex all day and night, there was no strange behavior that alluded to him annexing his gold somewhere. Olenna had contemplated asking the Iron Bank if maybe Arthur hid his gold there. But she knew that would be a fool's errand since the Braavos Bank would never sell their clients out, or else their reputation would be ruined. That would also ruin their business and no one would want to make deals with them. On the other hand, as Olenna was thinking those thoughts, Arthur was inside the wooden Colosseum-like structure, where he and another 19 men were in full armor and ready to bash each other. Arthur had a shield with a red hawk on a green and black field painted on it and a normal one-handed sword which was a little on the heavy side. His armor also seemed normal, and the only thing that seemed out of place was just how clean it was. The armor seemed to reflect the sun's rays like a mirror. Of course, this just perfectly would hinder Arthur's opponents when they fought against him. No one would believe that he did it intentionally, and if anyone said otherwise, people would refute them as Arthur was known through the lands as a knight of honor. This all fit Arthur's agenda. He had helped people all around the Seven Kingdoms and even hunted down bandits for free. If anyone tried to refute that, then they would be outed as liars. After all, they couldn't silence so many villages and towns that he had helped. Of course, Arthur never did anything that didn't benefit him in some ways. The bandit hunts done in the name of the Seven and Justice were just another one of those things. Since no one seemed to question where the bandits' corpses went. Due to this, Arthur always had some sacrifices on hand for his blood magic. "Begin!" yelled out the announcer, causing the crowd to cheer in happiness and the knights in the ground to start moving. Everyone got ready to look at Arthur, who was the biggest threat in the tourney. But sadly for them, he had already moved to fight the knight closest to him. Arthur hit the knight's hand with the wide part of his sword, causing the man to drop his weapon. Bam! In that split second that the other knight was in pain, Arthur used his shield and bashed the man's head, that even due to his helmet, it knocked the man down. He then kicked the knight's sword away and went to his next enemy. Arthur saw a man approaching him and was grateful that these fights in tourneys had the unspoken rule to not attack someone when they were already fighting an enemy. This rule was especially withheld in the Reach, after all, it would be an unknightly thing to do. That was why many lords called tourneys a knights playing war. Especially since rarely anyone died at these events. The second knight came running at Arthur full of ferocity, and he swung the sword. Arthur knew that if he tried to block it with his shield, then his arm would swell due to the strength of the hit. So in the split second, he sidestepped and as the weapon slashed in front of him, he used his sword with all the strength he could muster and hit the sword of the man who had slashed the ground. Clang! The other knight's sword flew away. Arthur's power was quite something to behold at this time as he trained by modern techniques and had a relatively modern diet. Both meat and vegetables were needed for him to get this kind of muscle strength. As he traveled, he bought quite some chickens from the farmers and hunted a lot of rabbits too. The fight wasn't over so Arthur got ready to hit with the blunt side of his sword the man's whose weapon flew away. But the man put his hands up and hurriedly said, "I surrender." Arthur looked around and saw 10 people were still left in the melee tourney. They each picked a fight against one person honorably. This was pretty much common courtesy, so fighters didn't gang up on one man and weren't staged. Staging a fight in this tourney would be the same as spitting on the Tyrell's face, so no one would do something like that. All these analytical thoughts went on in Arthur's head, his body moved instinctively as he could see even the smallest of movements with his eyes and predicted where the next move would come from. Arthur's next opponent was a man in full heavy and bulky parkour. Immediately Arthur could tell that the guy in front of him was an amateur. Having this much weight during a fight, while good for defense, it would tire you out way too quickly. During these tourneys, Arthur mostly wore different kinds of chainmail. They were lighter and generally better for these kinds of situations. After all, this wasn't a real war. Just some men fighting, and there was no need for heavy armor. You seem tired already. Maybe you should take a rest. Arthur mocked his opponent, trying to agitate him. Arthur loved his eyesight. Normally people wouldn't be able to tell who was tired under all that armor. But with his eagle-like vision, he could see even the smallest details from the cracks of the armor and rigid movements. "Shut the hell up!" yelled the man in anger, as he charged at Arthur. But the latter easily dodged the man's swing and used his own momentum to trip his opponent. Arthur then pointed his sword between the crack of the armor of his downed opponent. "I give up," said the man hurriedly. "The Reach really has some wimpy flower knights." Arthur couldn't help but contemplate. Arthur then looked at the other people left and immediately dropped his shield and pulled out another sword. Now, this has become a five-way fight. He needed to be going all out during this, and not concerning himself with defense too much. He immediately went on the offensive against another knight and he slashed at him with one sword. The knight blocked the slash with his shield, but Arthur used that single second that the opponent was concentrating on blocking the initial slash. Then Arthur pointed his other sword at the man's throat from the space between his armor and helmet. The other three men left looked at Arthur and then another one charged at him, ready to slash and dice. Arthur dropped one of his swords and stepped sideways. Then he grabbed his sword with both hands and used it like a baseball bat. Bam! He hit the man's helmet, denting it and knocking his opponent out cold. Arthur could hear the crowd cheering for him. Amazing! The strongest knight! Woohoo! Normally people would be distracted by the yells, but Arthur didn't mind them and looked to use the yells to his advantage. He looked at the other two knights who were fighting amongst themselves and could immediately see critical flaws in them. Arthur was able to determine that the one with the light armor was going to lose. He didn't have any experience fighting against armored men. By his estimation, to Arthur, the knights in this region were probably the weakest in the Seven Kingdoms. They really are just flower knights, thought Arthur. They look good but are shit at fighting. Arthur then found his shield and picked it up. After their battle was over, the armored knight came towards Arthur at a slow pace and he seemed to be careful. But Arthur ran towards him and feinted a slash. He brought up his shield but, instead of slashing, he used his shield to ram into his opponent. Bang! The opponent fell to the ground and Arthur could see his opponent was immediately about to throw his shield on Arthur's face, but he used his feet to step on the man's hands and pointed his sword at his opponent's throat. And the winner, my lords and ladies, is the undefeated Arthur Frey! Yelled out the announcer excitedly. The crowd went wild, but Arthur zoned them out. He had just earned 900 gold dragons from the meal, and another 300 from the archery competition. Arthur acted like he didn't care about the money and looked at Mace Tyrell and Olenna. They had their own stand with the best view of the tourney. He could feel the old woman's eyes look at him like a predator who was stalking his prey. The first thoughts that came to Arthur's mind when he saw the Queen of Thorns were, what a dangerous woman. Chapter 7, Unlimited Scam Work. Arthur. After my victory, I was invited to the feast. This whole tourney and celebration were being held for some Tyrell that was born recently. The chubby lord next to me continued rambling to my ear about something that I didn't care about. I knew from canon that he will only keep getting fatter and fatter as he gets older. That was Mace Tyrell, the big oaf. You know Sir Arthur, you were amazing out there. I have never seen someone with such skill and chivalry, said the stupid oaf. Even the way he spoke showed his stupidity. The person who is talking to me right now is a 20-year-old Mace Tyrell. The guy just keeps talking endlessly about useless stuff, but I just drone him out most of the time. Plus it is not bad to have a friend like him. Thank you for the compliment, Lord Tyrell, and I would like you to call me Arthur. Even though we just met, I feel like we have been long-time friends. I smiled at him in a friendly manner. It's good to have friends like him. Who knew when they could one day be useful? He smiled like a dumbass at my words, and I smiled back. From an outside perspective, it would seem like this was the making of best friends. Olenna looked at me like a hawk. How is your supper? My oaf son seems to enjoy it. It's very good, my lady, I answered politely, but Olenna wasn't as smart as she thought. Insulting her son like this makes her seem powerful, that's true, but it also showed who was in charge. That was the problem. Mace Tyrell wasn't a man who you should follow, everyone knew that. If the Tarly went into a revolt, who would win? That's a good question, something that would be unknown. But the answer would be certain if Olenna was to suddenly die. She is already an old woman, and death was always just around the corner for people of her age. Ha, I am no lady anymore. Joked Olenna at me, calling her my lady. Yet we all call you so, a smile adorned my face. I wonder why that is. Well, aren't you a smart boy? she asked, looking at me like a hawk. But my smile didn't falter. Thanks for the compliment, my lady. It wasn't a compliment. She clarified, and I knew that calling me a smart boy was her way of being demeaning. Olenna was trying to get a rise out of me and figure out what kind of person I was. But sadly for her, that won't be happening. Who cared what people called me? I wasn't some silly lord with a silly mustache, like her weak son. Well, it wasn't an insult either. Because it only becomes an insult depending on how I take it, deciding to clear up some things I went on. What people say isn't important, it doesn't matter. Actions do. After saying that, I pulled out a kitchen knife used to cut the meat and stabbed it on the table. The smile on my face and the loud music stopped anyone from hearing what we were talking about. So they assumed that we were just joking or something along those lines. Was that a threat? Asked Olenna, her face growing colder. I shrugged. As I said before, my intentions don't matter. What do you interpret it as, my lady? I am not your lady, boy, said Olenna, a little anger slipped through in her voice. No one had probably talked to her like this. Especially someone with such a low standing as myself. Also what matters here is when my guards bash your head in the ground, should I tell them to stop or not? The confident smirk was back on her face as she looked at me with a condescending look. Well, you wouldn't be able to tell them to stop. Or say anything at all for that matter. I am currently sitting at the head of the table with you and your son. I could slaughter you, your son, his wife, and his children. Before any guard could even pull out their swords I probably would have killed most of the Tyrell family by then. My smile widened. The Tyrell house would enter a civil war to decide who would be the successor amongst the survivors, and at the end, a Tarly would take over. Yes, you could give the order, but your family would be destroyed. Let me give you some advice, Lady Tyrell. Don't try to intimidate madmen, religious men, or men who are way too dangerous and with many secrets. It could end badly for you, and House Tyrell. Those kinds of people will drag you into their level, and you can't win at their game. Ha, that was quite a speech there, she dismissed my words. I think you shouldn't participate in tourneys in the Reach. Who knows, accidents in these kinds of sports happen very often. Even a skilled man like you could meet his end in an unfortunate incident. Oh, she is threatening me. It seems like I have unnerved her more than I thought. Maybe the possibility of me having the power to single-handedly end the Tyrell house at this moment was a shock to her. Because she knew that it was the truth. Who could stop me in an instant close by? Her oaf son who can't even hold a sword, right? No, I would slaughter them all before the guards could even react. Also even then, there was a small chance of survival if I jumped from the balcony to the river down below Highgarden. Just because someone is called lord or lady doesn't suddenly make them invincible. Even though it gives the illusion of being so sometimes. But that's it, it's just an illusion. People die what they are killed. That's a fact of the world. Even kings die like common men. Welp, that's quite late to learn such a thing, Lady Olenna. But a wise man once said that life is a learning experience. I said while getting up from the table and walking off. One look at Olenna was enough to stop her from doing anything stupid like send guards at me while I was away from public eyes. While she was very politically smart, she didn't know brash men of war can be. They don't give a sh*t about her logic. After that whole ordeal with Olenna, I decided to walk around a little. Mace Tyrell just became a useless friend because Olenna had his claws in him. He would be more useful if he was dead, but sadly I can't go around killing him and it would be too hard. But as I walked on the outskirts of the party where there were only some sleeping drunk servants, amongst them was a pretty woman wearing an expensive dress and nice jewelry. She had brown hair and green eyes that stuck out. Damn, these inbreed noble ladies are good looking. When was the last time I laid with a woman? Right, ever since Maggie, I don't think I laid with anyone else. Kinda forgot about and lost such things once the amazing blood magic came around. Even sex seemed something secondary in comparison to such power. By her wine glass and slouched appearance, the woman wasn't in a good mood. Also judging by her clothing she was some noble lady or a lord's daughter. A pretty one too, so probably the wife or daughter of a powerful lord. If my memory serves me right, this should be Lady Oakhart or the lord's sister. I believe she should have already been married to some knight that served her house. Well, whatever, it doesn't matter. Hello there, my lady. You shouldn't stay here with degenerates, let me escort you back to your family. The woman looked at me, and by the look in her eyes, I could instantly tell that she was drunk. In my first life, one had to learn to notice when someone was drunk. They would say many things and are easier to persuade. Hey? Who the hell are you? She asked, her face showed anger but her words seemed curious. A true lady, trained to hide her real thoughts, sadly that didn't work once she was drunk. Judging by her demeanor, something is annoying her. In a party like this with nobles and pretty maids around, it's easy to guess what was happening. Probably her husband was messing around with a maid or some other noble lady. This woman would be better to do it with than some maid because servants can't help but talk. But this noble woman won't speak or spread any rumors about me, even if this knight ended up with a child in her belly. She would just claim that it was her husband's kid, especially since my features of dark hair and eyes were very common. My name is Robert, nice to meet you, my lady. How is your husband doing? I asked, intentionally guiding the conversation towards her husband. That immediately put a sour look on her face. Damn it. She banged her fist on the edge of the balcony. What is so good about some peasant maid with rough hands? That damn idiot. Yes, he must be the idiot of idiots, I agreed with her. She looked at me in surprise as our faces got closer. To not recognize your beauty, the greatest fool indeed. A maid could never even compare to you. I would kill 100 maids to just kiss you. She looked me in the eyes and smirked. Let me take you somewhere, a place where we can have our privacy. Unmarried and jealous women are so easy to get into bed with. Say some lie that makes them feel special and then they will easily fall in your hands. Welp, a pretty married woman so young is easy to find in these times. If I give her a child, could I use that as blackmail against her in the future? Normal POV. 1 year had passed since Arthur's tourney in the Reach. Since then, he decided to move away. He might have said a lot of words in front of Olenna, but he wasn't stupid to take a threat from her lightly. Though he liked for people to fear him to keep them in line, he also loved his life way more than that. Olenna was a dangerous woman with the Reach at her fingertips. So threatening her and staying in her house would be an invitation to disaster. So he did the logical thing and he decided to go to other lands that he had planned. That being the Vale, he had just arrived at the castle of House Arryn. Since Arthur was now 18, he couldn't help but smile a little. His body had grown up quite a bit due to his good and nutritious lifestyle and regular exercise. Currently, Arthur was in a bed on the Eyrie, a warm body was next to him, it was a woman. He could feel the two flesh minds press on him. Right, I forgot about the serving girl I took to bed yesterday. Thought Arthur as he pushed away the woman leaning on him and got up. As soon as he did so, his mind immediately wandered toward his plans. He wasn't in the Vale to compete in any tourneys, though the place had a lot of knights, the Vale didn't have as many tourneys as the Reach or Westerlands had. But that didn't matter, Arthur had come here to make friends with Robert Baratheon. This was a good investment that could have amazing returns. Though the plan had a few hiccups, as Arthur had just arrived in the Vale and Robert wasn't here, and neither was Jon Arryn. The latter had a meeting in Gulltown and had taken his 2 protégés with him. Soon he should be able to meet with Jon Arryn. Though this had been a little bad luck, Arthur was glad that while they were coming here no mountain clansmen attacked him. Though these days waiting for them hadn't been boring. Plenty of beautiful girls in the Eyrie, both noble and common. At least his reputation as a knight helped get access to both kinds of girls quite easily. There were even some virgin girls amongst them. Their future husbands will be having a field day on their wedding night. Why? Because Arthur just taught their wives tricks from the modern world. Leon. Arthur called out to his healer. As if the man had been waiting behind the door, he immediately came in. Yes, lord. The usual? He asked. Arthur frowned as he and his healer walked off the room, leaving the sleeping girl behind. What was the name of the girl? The personal healer cleared his throat and started to explain. She is a highborn girl, her mother recently. I don't care about her life story, Leon. I need her name, just her last name. Arthur didn't care about the girl's life, he already knew some of it from drowning out the girl's conversation last night. Acting like he was listening to her troubles had already allowed him to pick up some things about the girl. It's Hersey, I believe. Hi. Okay, then that's enough. Arthur interrupted him again as they went to the kitchens to get some food. Wait, doesn't she have a sister too? Yeah, I believe so, confirmed Leon. Her sister had nicer tits. He said casually. Thinking back on a blonde figure that vaguely resembled the woman he had slept with last night. Also get 105 silver stags for each of the men, you included. Today is payday. Leon smiled, working for Arthur was good. What a common folk would make in half a year, they made in 1 week. So it was quite good. Of course, none of them knew that Arthur paid them so well because he wanted them to become the best meat shields they could be. After all, he wasn't arrow-proof. Though he never said it out loud, Arthur's current wealth wasn't something too big. He had about 2,200 gold dragons available for his plans. He had fought in over 20 tourneys, but most of them had the reward of 100 gold dragons or less. Only big families hold grand tourneys with rewards above 500 gold dragons. So thinking about it now, back in the show when Robert wanted a tourney with the winner rewarded 50,000 gold dragons. Arthur could understand why Ned Stark at the time considered it outrageous. Still, though, 2,000 gold dragons were enough to buy a small castle. But at the same time, this was wealth that many people would consider worth risking their lives for. Also, the tourneys were public, so there wasn't a way to hide his income from determined people. Hell, Arthur sometimes suspected that some of his men might mutiny if he didn't use sweet words to dissuade them. By now though, he didn't keep his wealth on himself. Instead, he had his hawk pick up small pouches and hide them in certain places where no human would ever go to, and even if they wanted, they couldn't. Though even through all this, Arthur made sure to use flowered words and promises of wealth that kept his men very satisfied. That way he could use them as sacrifices in case of an emergency. Lord. Suddenly a servant rushed into the kitchens and rushed towards Arthur. Lord Arryn has arrived. Arthur smirked. Having a good relationship with the servants was quite useful. Arthur. It didn't take long to get invited to some drinking party. Some woman that was flirting with Robert told me about it. Cheers to Arthur the Undefeated. The Red Hawk. They have so many names for you, Frey. They say that you have never lost a fight since you were born, even during training against squires twice your age you defeated them. Said Robert in a jovial mood as he slapped my shoulder. I smiled at him. What can I say? Titles seem to breed more titles. Bah. You humble fuck. Act at least a little proud or you will make me feel like a goddamn. It seemed like the future Fat King was about to say something. But he turned around and almost threw up. Anyway, what were we talking about again? He slapped my shoulder again, and I had to stop myself from wincing. Though Robert was doing this playfully, his strength was unmistakable. This drunk guy was pretty strong, I must admit that. Welp, time to fake drink something and become fake drunk. 2 hours later and everyone was a little hammered, even the ones who didn't usually drink. Jon Arryn seemed a little tipsy too. Well, what can I say, Rob? I am just that good. I answered him with a drunken arrogant smirk on my face. The baddest man in this world. I am undefeated. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Ha, so your ego comes out when you drink. Well, it happens to the best of us. Robert smiled back, his face flushed from drinking the same amount as 4 men. Really wanna try then? I bet I will break your record in no time. I made a face like I swallowed a lemon and put my head on the table. Listen Rob, why you are drunk, that is unfair for me to fight you like that. And that is a lie. I have been sipping on my 5th glass of wine but I have been spilling all of them under the table. I was not dumb enough to dull my senses in a world like Game of Thrones. If someone had my knowledge of the story and still got drunk then they should just slit their throats instead. He then pointed a shaking finger toward me. It's a goddamn miracle he wasn't dead by the time Cannon came around, by the amount he usually drank. Why you are drunk too, reasoned Robert in a drunken manner while stuttering away. My eyes widened as if I just had a big revelation. Oh yeah, you are right. Well then let's go outside and fight. I went outside, the guards gave me a blunt sword and a shield. They also give Robert a light metal hammer without spikes. Looking at the audience, I could see them snickering at us. Some people even seemed to want and see me lose this battle, breaking my legend of being undefeated. Hey, does anyone wanna bet? I will take all bets against me. Saying so resolutely, I spread my arms and mentioning them to come at me. By the end, the people who knew Robert and of his monstrous strength, all together bet 800 gold dragons against me. Well, it is pretty logical on their part. After all, a drunk guy can't dodge very well and Robert has the advantage of strength against me. I was known for my technique, which wouldn't be any good in a drunk state. Oh boy, they are about to get scammed so hard. Jon Arryn, the white-haired man in his elderly age, came towards us. He just rubbed his eyes, probably having heard what had happened already. Okay, Jon Arryn as Lord Paramount of the Vale, I will be the judge. I could see the small smirk on his face which was filled with anticipation on who would win. Okay, now I was sure that Jon Arryn had a little too much to drink. Allowing us to fight while drunk and all that didn't seem like him at all. He also said his title, it must be a habit. Begin. He yelled out of nowhere, without even counting down. Robert rushed at me without even a second thought in his mind. Swinging his hammer like a madman towards my head. He wanted to bash my skull on the ground, and the man was pretty fast too. Still, though, he wasn't fast enough as I jumped back, dodging the hammer swipe easily. Whoa! Even while drunk, look at that perfect form, said one of the spectators while he pointed at me. Ugh! Robert grunted and swiped his hammer at me from overhead, this time I easily sidestepped and as the hammer landed on the ground. I stepped on the hammer, making Robert unable to pull it up. Bam! Asterisk. Then I bashed his head in with my shield. Blood came out of his nose as he fell to the ground, unconscious. Well, I just became 800 gold dragons richer. Now I had 3,000 gold dragons in total. That means having the buying power of around $30 million. Damn, I love medieval societies, the small fold work and I just become richer. I looked at my earning. Hiccup asterisk. Still with my act on, after all, couldn't have other people know that the righteous knight Arthur was out here scamming rich kids out of their money. I'll leave my earnings in a pouch. At the side of the ring, I am not done yet. After announcing that, my gaze wandered toward the people around. A plan formed on my head. Whoa. I suddenly stumbled and fell on my butt, like a drunk who could barely stand up. I then looked at the grey-eyed young man helping Robert get up. How about you, Ned, wanna give it a try? I will again take all the bets that are placed against me. What, no way he beat Lord Robert so easily. I am not betting again, said a guy from the audience. Are you crazy? Lord Stark is completely sober and he is a good fighter, as good as Lord Baratheon. No matter how good Arthur is, I don't believe he can beat Lord Stark drunk, argued another audience member. Oh, thank you, random guy. Eddard frowned a little at the situation in front of him. Chapter 8, and the Nobel Prize goes to Arthur. Eddard looked around and didn't know whether to fight me or not. But by now I had the hearts of the audience set aflame. They had already lost quite some money against me. They wanted to at least see my face bashed in a little. Ned Stark. Break that drunk's face. Just look at that smug look. His face is pretty much begging to be punched. Go Stark. I just bet all my savings on you. I did the same. Me too. The crowd yelled out for a fight. They wanted it. People like this, with their blood that had gone to their head, were easy to point in the direction I wanted them to go. Eddard felt the peer pressure and walked forward after I did some gestures for him to come. He whispered something under his breath, but I didn't pay attention to it as my eyes were on the money pile that had been bet against me. The healer in my group held up 5 fingers once he saw me looking in his direction, meaning that I would get 500 gold dragons if I won this fight. Clang! My shield fell on the ground as if it had slipped out of my fingers by accident. People! Can't you see how drunk I am? Bet some more money. Oh, oops, sorry, it slipped out of my hand. I sheepishly apologized and went to pick up my shield. Ned looked at this with a strange look on his face. I don't think it would be honorable to count this as a duel, Lord Arthur. He was easy to read. Most likely he didn't want to ruin my record of winning streaks. After all, my fame would drop significantly if I lost, as my whole gimmick was being unbeatable with the sword. It almost made me feel bad for using a guy like him. But sadly that's how the world worked. Usually, the good people would always be used by the bad. Well, I don't make the rules on how reality works, I only abuse those rules. Hey now Ned, no need with the F formality, call me Arthur or just Ari for short. We are friends after all, aren't we? I said to him while stuttering through my words. Acting drunk wasn't hard, I just needed to think what I would do if my reasoning was lowered and the thought process hit the gutter. He smirked. Yes, I guess we are friends. You can call me Ned too. Though you already seem to be doing so. I drunkenly smirked too and gave him a thumbs up. Well, we better start the fight before I piss myself. Ha 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 ha. Ned laughed, finding the situation funny, as his worries about my future seemed to disappear. Begin. Jonaran announced the start of the fight. Immediately after he said that, I dropped my sword and shield on the ground before jumping into action. I ran towards him, and Ned slashed at me horizontally. But I ducked under his swing as low as I could. While running forward, Ned's arms couldn't move back fast enough to defend himself as he was holding into his sword. Also, he had never seen a situation like this, so his body couldn't react in time as I extended my palm and pushed his chin while tangling my leg with his. He immediately started falling as his core weight was affected by gravity. But he also used one of his hands to grab me by the shirt to pull me down with him. I fell, and as I did so, my foot was already nested into his other sword-wielding hand and slammed on the ground. I ended up sitting on his stomach, while his hand with the sword got squished by my leg. This made him unable to react as I did a stabbing motion toward him, but then I looked at my empty hand. Ah, right, I dropped my weapon, I said jokingly and waved my hand around. Though as the fight wasn't over, I looked at my hand and a look of realization drew on my face. Oh well. Bam. I punched Ned on the face, once, twice, and then he was knocked out. I felt a crunch while punching. Did I break his nose? To finish my drunken act, I got up and started dancing and doing strange dance moves for this world. Like the moonwalk while singing around. Another one bites the dust. To return, I even tried to make the beat of the song with my voice. But it didn't sound well at all, and I noticed the people looking at me strangely. Bahaha, look at him go. You're an amazing singer, yelled out one of the audience members while he laughed along. Hey man. I lost money to that guy. Can you stop celebrating? But some people had lost a lot of money, so they weren't in a good mood. Well, sorry for you being a dumbass brother, bahaha. Some others laughed at the man's misfortune. Yeah, a special kind of stupidity is needed to have the brain to bet in a drunk fight. The people who didn't have the money to bet on these fights mocked the people who did have the money and lost it. After I do some more stupid stuff to sell it off as I was drunk. I looked around and mentioned towards the other people around me. So do I have any other challengers? I rubbed my shoulders slightly and stretched, acting as though I didn't say anything. The fatigue was getting to me. Playing myself as an honorable man who doesn't know what to stop fighting was the best play I could make to earn me some money. Had another 12 challengers that night, each of them lost against me and my money pile only grew larger as at the end I no longer needed to fake the signs of fatigue. Yet I still defeated every single drunk man that came to fight me that night, not even once did I lose. Fighting drunk people truly was easier than expected. Even though I wasn't a martial artist in my real life, some moves could still break even the strongest of knights. For example, one fight was settled with me grabbing my opponent's hair. Once someone does that, they can guide the body of the opponent wherever they want, so it was illegal in all forms of fighting sports. But there were none of those rules out here in medieval times. The night though wasn't very profitable after Ned, as already most of the people had lost their money. Still, there were quite some winnings and I decided to spread a huge sum amongst my companions to keep them loyal. The men were overjoyed. After all, that is an astronomical amount of money for them. They could live the rest of their lives relatively easily in any village they might decide to settle on. But by now, I was sure that their loyalty to me was hard as steel and they would follow me along. After all, instead of ending up as some farmer by leaving now, they could live like lords. Using their greed to my advantage wasn't hard. None of them had any experience dealing with someone like me. Time passed and I had to leave the Vale. I couldn't stay here forever. My ambitions wouldn't end with just being a glorified bodyguard. Now I needed to start building my army because magic was something amazing. It wasn't necessarily too strong. 20 well-armed knights could tear me apart with no difficulty if it came down to it. So that was why getting a big army was needed. In this place, I had a lot of fun with a lot of young girls. Also, *King, some noble girls who were fostered here in the Vale. Probably some bastards will start running around now, but none of that mattered. Every lord had their bastard children when they were young. But of course, when they got older, they acted like the kids didn't exist. I haven't decided what to do with mine yet. Maybe I will take them under my wings? Or maybe not. That's debatable, but I knew for sure I won't be like Ned and create drama in the family because of his bastard. The women of this world were also easy to trick. I just had to act as their knight in shining armor and use some cliché lines from some books. After that, they just pretty much threw themselves at me to take their maiden hand, virginity, before they got married to some old man who probably won't even be able to get it up. In the end, I had to do my duty as a knight to always help maidens in their time of need. My delving into blood magic also became heavier as I started delving deep into the prophetic side and started reading people's fates after they got drunk. Apparently one of my guards would die before me, so keeping him to my side would be a good idea. Though something creepy kept happening every time I used divination, usually I forgot the visions that I saw and they could be highly inaccurate or a metaphor. But something stood out when I decided to write my memories before forgetting them. This was my little loophole for the magic. Yet, all the writings had something written in them on top of that person's fate. Like someone was sending me a warning through a prophecy? Beware of who the true players of the game are. These thoughts all ran through my mind and I saw the giant statue of Braavos in the distance. The ship rocketed due to the wave and the small slip of paper that I had read hundreds of times slipped out of my fingers and landed into the water. It felt like the future me was sending me a warning. And even though the giant of Essos stood before me, one of the biggest statues in this world, my eyes tracked into the paper that fell in the water. The limit of blood magic was that one could only read a person's fate 3 times in their life, and if the magic user revealed too much their blood vessels would erupt. So I always had to write in riddles, even to myself. It was a shame a blood mage can't read his own fate, but this warning had put me on edge. Still, though, I knew that worrying about such things was useless, as prophecies aren't necessarily unbreakable. So my decisions will be my own in the end. But taking that into account, Braavos should be a good place to start. My tourney fighting days are now over, time to start playing for real. East shall be your ghost's fortune. That was another fate that one of the guards got. The ghost here was obviously me as I was the one possessing a body. But if this fate reading led me on an illogical path, I will immediately abandon it. I shook my head to get rid of such thoughts and looked at the city in front of me. Braavos, a city of trade. It is a place of trade where I could use my talents and modern trading knowledge to its fullest potential. Chapter 9, Unlimited Blackmail Works. In a balcony of one of the lavish houses in Braavos, Arthur leaned on the railing and looked at the giant statue that could be seen even from here. He was wearing loose clothes and his hair had grown a little taller now, but he let it grow as he no longer would be fighting anyone anymore. What he needed now was to be charming, something that combined both physical appearance and personality. "Aren't you coming in, dear?" the voice of a woman reverberated from behind him as she got closer and hugged Arthur from behind. He noticed that she was still naked, but didn't turn to look at her. "I wish I had met you as soon as you came to Braavos. We could have spent so much time together like this." Arthur smiled, though the joy didn't seem to reach his eyes. "I had short hair back then, almost bald. Are you into bald men?" "Ha ha ha," she laughed gently. "No, but I would love to see you bald and bashing the heads of brutes. Weren't you some kind of warrior from the other side of the sea? I heard some rumors of you being undefeated in battle. Those days are long gone now, said Arthur, turning around and looking at the young woman who was around his age. She had dark hair and dazzling blue eyes, her body seemed to have been built for the pleasure of men and her figure was quite voluptuous. I came here to find a woman who wouldn't be too concerned with my martial strength. Sure, I can fight very well and would fight if the woman I love was in danger. But it doesn't mean that I am that brute any longer. Back then for me, fights were everything and even fucking was secondary. The woman smiled and leaned forward, giving him a kiss and Arthur reciprocated. Her eyes were filled with love, his eyes on the other hand were dark and unreadable. Arthur recounted what had happened since he came to Braavos. He had been in this place for about a year now, and he hadn't made any moves yet. Instead, he observed how the market wrecked and how everyday people used it, each day was spent. After all, going into something head first without knowing how it worked was not a smart decision. He couldn't just swipe a wand and make money, so he had to learn how the trade in Braavos worked and how to make himself an integral part of it. The woman in his arms was the daughter of some big shot merchant here, though her status was quite low within the merchant's family as her mother was a prostitute. Though the young woman knew quite a lot about secret things within the trading world, as her father talked about inside deals at the dinner table to her brothers and other siblings. Now she simply relayed those things to her secret lover. After spending some time in the young woman's house, Arthur finally left around midday. He closed his eyes as soon as he walked outside, and immediately he could see from a bird's point of view. After making sure he wasn't tailed, he walked back to his modest house with a red hawk always tailing him from the sky and keeping an eye out for any suspicious people. Once Arthur walked inside his house, he saw his men doing their things. The healer was making some medicine, and the others were playing some Braavos game that had the possibility to lose your fingers. Arthur. Keenus, I called out to one of the guards who had followed me from the village. He was the one playing the dangerous game while the others looked on. Don't lose your fingers, what will your wife have to pleasure her if you lose them? Yeah, I mean with how small your dick is I think your wife might still be a maiden. Added another guy jokingly. Maybe I can help you with that. Keenus on the other hand shook his head. It's average size. Man, I knew I shouldn't have told you about my insecurities. Men are like hungry wolves, Keenus, once they spot weakness they will do everything they can to devious you, I advised him as a smirk slowly appeared on my face. Unlike the fake smiles used to charm some lonely wives, this was a genuine smile. Even in the worst situations, one must have a sense of humor about these things. Also the size doesn't matter to other guys, you ain't fucking them. But what matters is how big you say your cock is. Listen to him Keenus, one day you might grow to be one of us, said one of the men jokingly. We are the Big Dick Gang. We have conquered all the women of Westeros, so that's the real reason we came east. I wonder how the whores in Westeros cry out for my presence. Shut the hell up Butch, all the whores call you the one pump chump, so stop bragging about your game, because you have got none, Keenus added, this being his turn to make fun of Butch. I only shook my head as the men's argument continued and I just walked towards the basement where the winery was. Being underground and in the dark kept the place kinda cold, so the drinks and beverages were cold. Kind of like the medieval version of a fridge. The place was dark, and I didn't bring a torch with me. Instead, I counted the steps and used my enhanced vision to find the correct place. Once there I took out my sword and dug it in the ground. About an inch or two deep on the ground, I felt some resistance. Yep, this was the correct place. Using my sword I easily took out the dirt and pulled out a heavy box that was attached to a chain. Opening it revealed to be a pile of gold inside, almost 5,000 gold dragons. I don't trust any of my men with this amount of wealth, so only I knew where this was hidden. After taking the box I put it on a small horse carriage together with my guards on tow as they sat together with me in the carriage while the healer drove. Since my house was in a well-populated area, no man would dare commit a crime here as the guards would be upon them in no time. I had purposefully chosen this place and spent quite some gold to get a relatively small place for such a high price. Sure, I had my guards, but they weren't something that could fight 20 thieves. The best victories were those that are won without even fighting. As we arrived at the Iron Bank, my men carried my big box of gold inside the place. I looked at the men from the corner of my eyes and both Keenus and Butch who were joking as if we were all good friends, now they looked at the chest and greed inevitably appeared in their gazes. But they knew they couldn't do anything here. Also, I don't blame them, this amount of money would set them for life. Most people would have the same look in their positions. Sir, please come this way, Banker Gillard has told us of your arrival. A servant came towards them and he was dressed smartly. He then led us all towards a private room. The room we entered wasn't anything special, it had a simple desk and 3 men were already waiting there for me. I recognized the one sitting in the middle, he was a chubby man with a declining hairline and looked like he was 40 when in actuality he was only 25 years old. He is the man known as Gillard, the other 2, I had no idea who they were. Welcome, Sir Arthur, Gillard greeted me and he had a giant smile on his face. I hear that you must be here to make a deposit to the Iron Bank. Immediately the two other colleagues gave him a pointed look. He had just inadvertently told me that the Iron Bank had been keeping an eye on me. But Gillard didn't seem to notice the men's looks. Whether he was faking his naivety or not was a mystery even to me. It seems that you are well informed, I remarked looking the man in the eye. And you would be half correct, good sirs, but I am also here to make a purchase. Well good, that's good for the both of us. I can guarantee you that the Iron Bank offers the best deals. Gillard stated enthusiastically, immediately earning his colleagues' ire as they looked at him with anger. Bankers were usually very discreet about their emotions, and showing too much could lead to a loss of profit. Anyway, what do you need to purchase, Sir Arthur? One of the other men intervened. I am sure that we can help you. It was easy to see that Gillard and the other colleagues of his weren't as friendly with each other. But that was extremely weird. True, I had some backhanded dealings with Gillard and we have exchanged information in the past. Still though, showing a not unified front while in the presence of others was bad. The Iron Bank didn't become the strongest bank in Essos by having people incompetent in their midst. Something was wrong here, and I needed to find out before things developed into an unfavorable situation. I need a ship. Getting straight to the point, I decided to test how these people would react. A mid-sized galleon that is suited for a merchant. I don't know my ships too well, so I will leave the details to you guys. Though I said that, it was all a lie. Spending time in the docks looking at trade meant that I knew quite a bit about all kinds of ships and what one was better for what. Yet, none of this needed to be known by these guys. The man to the right nodded and spoke for the first time. We understand, the Iron Bank will do its best to satisfy your demands. A budget of 800 gold dragons would be needed for the ship's construction. I frowned at that and expressed my displeasure outwardly too. There was no need to hide my emotions this time. 800? That's too expensive, even in Gulltown ships are cheaper. I thought Braavos had a good trade on ships, maybe I was wrong. Buying a ship in Gulltown cost about 600 gold dragons, but saying something like that out loud would immediately impede my negotiations with them. Because that said that I would be okay with that price or something just a little lower. I needed to start on an equal footing with them in this negotiation. Also, Gillard was someone I had on the inside and we exchanged information countless times for each other's benefit. But both of us will look after our own interests, so he will look out for himself and his profits first and foremost. How about 785 gold dragons? Offered the man on the left. I acted like my mind was elsewhere thinking about something before replying to them. If you can wiggle me down to 400 gold dragons, then we have a deal. In the whole of Essos, you won't find the kind of ship you are looking for with 400 gold dragons. Said the man on the right, shaking his head as if to prove his point. 780 is the best I can do. Yeah right? As if you have traveled all of Essos and know that for a fact? He was short-selling me to raise his profits on this deal. They know that I have the money, so they will try to get me a deal that would require me to spend a lot. I know that this money might seem a lot, I pointed at the box. But there are other things I need to buy too. So I can't pay more than 410 gold dragons. What would those things be? Asked Gillard with an innocent look on his face. Now, this might seem like a simple question and many would answer due to how foolish Gillard had been acting. Many people would lower their guard against someone who seemed dumber than them. Sadly for them, ever since I entered this meeting, my opinion on Gillard was changed and he was suspicious. First, I already knew that he played himself to be more stupid than he usually was. Second, the Iron Bank had hundreds of bankers and employees under him, so why did he come to deal with me? After all, the chances of getting him were lower than 1% due to the hundreds of employees like him. So the end conclusion is that the Iron Bank knew of my deals with him, and he possibly told them, and now they want to use him to get a profit over me. Keep dreaming. I had knowledge of the future and so many scams and illegal strategies that even the hundreds of bankers' minds combined couldn't come up with. My strategies were hundreds, possibly thousands of years ahead of theirs. These thoughts all went through my mind in a couple of seconds and I answered. Well, there are many things that a merchant needs to conduct his trade. I am sure the Iron Bank knows these things better than me. Though their faces didn't show anything, I could see by their rigid movements that they were annoyed by my answer that pretty much told them nothing. A slight tightening of Gillard's fist showed that he was getting irritated. Yeah, I would be very irritated too. For these bankers, time was money. They could be dealing with some more schmuck that would be easy to get money out of, instead of me. Anyway, 410 gold dragons is daylight robbery, we won't be able to make any profit with that. Said the man on the left. Gillard nodded his head too. Yeah, like I would trust anything that came out of you guys' mouths. I doubt you would make a deal in which there is no profit. I understand your predicament, but my money was hard-earned too. I risked my life every day on tourneys, fighting and coming close to death many times. So I hope you understand how cheap I could be sometimes. So how about 413 gold dragons? We continued our negotiations for hours until the sun was about to set. Hours upon hours passed and the bankers kept getting more irritated. I was increasing each offer with only 2 or 3 gold dragons, never too much, so this would waste time. A very inefficient method of negotiating that would only waste time. Time that I had to waste, and these bankers would lose more money the more time they spent here. It was obvious how this would end. Fine. 500 gold it is. Yelled out the one on the right. He seemed irritated by the deal and just walked out. After that, I deposited the money I had with me and we all went to our own homes. This was a good deal for me. 500 gold dragons for a Braavos ship was something most people wouldn't be able to get. Not many would think this was all so I could get a good deal. That's exactly what I want them to think. While riding in the carriage, I closed one of my eyes and my vision changed. Initially, it was very disorienting. After all, I was looking from one of the eyes of my hawk and the other in the real me. It almost made me want to throw up. The human brain wasn't made to comprehend looking at the world like this. My hawk was looking straight at the iron bank's back doors where only the staff use. It took until I was comfortable and in bed for someone to come out of the back door. And the person was someone I recognized. He also had 2 guards with him. This showed that it wasn't just some guy going out to get some dinner. My hawk followed him and I saw every movement the man and his guards made. Looking for any secret messages, spy contact, suddenly bumping into people, or anything like that. He went towards a part of Braavos that wasn't popular due to the aggressive residents in a non-profitable area. This was called the Green Canal, and as he went there he talked with someone who seemed to run a shipmaking workshop. But this workshop wouldn't be noticeable to any normal merchant or people. Who would anyone make a business in such a remote place? I cut off the connection with my hawk and opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling of my bedroom. The last order to the hawk was to follow the head shipwright, which was surprisingly a woman. Well, I didn't care about gender if she made me good ships. But I would like to make sure if I could cut even more middlemen to get the best price possible. The next day, at the break of dawn, the Iron Bank sent me a notice that I would get my newly made ship in 5 days. It was surprising how fast they seemed to work. A ship in 5 days? Or were the ships pre-made? How long does it take to make a ship normally? For the average workforce, it would take around a month. I need someone in the know for these things. One doesn't enter a business without knowing everything there is to know about it. Only then can one reduce the chances of failure. With those thoughts in mind, I put on some fancy clothes which consisted of some robes that looked expensive, and told 2 of my men to accompany me just in case. Also hiding some weapons under the robe was an easy task. If this meeting goes well, then I think my lucky break might just come smacking me in the face. I possibly found myself a golden goose. I went towards the shipbuilding place with my guards following me. The place was quite neat and I noticed many things that a bird's point of view wouldn't. Like the wood planks, ship keels all around with a couple of people working on them. "Hello, excuse me," I called out, trying to find the head shipwright of this place. Then a tall, slightly muscled tan woman came out of the tent. She was the one who talked with the Iron Bank employee yesterday. "What can I help you with, sir?" she asked, trying to sound polite, but it was clear she didn't care how welcoming she sounded. "I require some middle-sized merchant ships." She seemed to think for a while and finally said, 400 gold pieces for each of them. That should be somewhere around 370 gold dragons. Which was already cheaper than the 500 the Iron Bank told me. This was why people should cut out the useless middleman. But still, I wouldn't be an aspiring merchant if I was not ready to negotiate. "From my calculations, my lady." She just snorts. "I am not your lady, little boy." "Oh, is that so?" I stopped talking and just looked her directly in the eyes. "As I was saying, my lady. From my calculations, it should take only 80 gold pieces to make a ship. So why charge me so much?" She crosses her arms. "What do you know? I have to pay my workers and pay my taxes to the merchant guild. It isn't that easy running a business, brat." I then just smirked and said, "Yeah, and I don't think you have much work, because well." I looked at her chest. I could see her face morphing into an angry scrawl. "And what is that supposed to mean, boy?" "Well, my little lady. If you get offended by such a small fire, you shouldn't be in the forge. But what I mean is that you probably don't have a lot of customers because people usually don't trust a woman to be good at building ships." She smirked at my words as if she had her own secret. "Oh, trust me, little boy. I can get by very well, so there is no need to be worried about me." I just looked at her with a serious face. "Okay, enough foreplay, time to get to the good stuff. You mean the Iron Bank, right?" Her eyes widened and her body froze in place. Well, it seemed like this was a bigger deal than I thought for her. So what? I smirked. "Well then, this is good. Well, then the Iron Bank will lose its credibility if some rumors started saying that they are using a woman to build their ships. They obviously wouldn't want to work with the Iron Bank anymore, and then the Iron Bank will lose money. She then calmed down and in a grave tone said, "Don't worry about me, boy, I will get by." Then she turned around and started going back. What will happen if someone ruins the reputation of the Iron Bank? The Iron Bank will have its due. She stopped in her tracks, finally caught on to what I was saying, and turned around. "So you are willing to risk your life for some gold?" "Obviously not. I was 99% sure of how this would play out. If I don't risk my life for gold, then what kind of merchant would I be?" "A living one," she replied without missing a beat. "Damn, that was a good comeback. No, I would be a poor merchant, and a poor merchant is a fucking beggar. If the Iron Bank tries to silence me, well then they will silence you too. Also, if you kill me here today, I have already ordered some people in case I die." I then smiled creepily. "Then I will drag you with me." Her eyes widened in horror, I could see the fear on her face. She also seemed kind of taken back by how I am so reckless with my life. But even if this failed, I could just scar my face, kill my traveling companions, and have a new start. No need for the faceless men to come after me. Though this will only be a last option kind of thing. She then let out a frustrated sigh. This woman would have probably had me killed if I didn't have two of my guards here. "Okay, I will sell you the ships at the same price that I sell them to the Iron Bank, for 150 gold. She seemed annoyed and barely was able to get the words out of her mouth. Well then, let's see how far I could take this. With that in mind, I put a questioning look on my face. "Who told you that I wanted a deal only as good as the Iron Bank? I want 100 gold pieces for each ship." "What? No. I will barely be able to pay my workers and buy timber with that amount of money," she yelled out loud, getting the attention of everyone around us. I then put my pinky finger in my ear. Damn, she is a screamer, that one. "Okay, I will give you 107 gold pieces per ship. That should help you, and that should help you stay afloat." She frowned. "That is not how you make a deal." I made a bewildered face. "What? You thought we were making a deal?" "No, dear." I then put a bright smile on my face. "I am blackmailing you." Chapter 10, The Tale of a Lady. After finishing the deal with the woman, Arthur ordered 15 middle-sized merchant ships. The order wasn't anything special, but as Arthur walked away, he had a smile on his face. Mora, female ship dealer, POV. As I was walking on to a certain place that I hated, my mind couldn't help but contemplate the decisions in my life and how things had gone. Everything had changed once Arthur Redhawk had come last year and made an offer I couldn't refuse. I was born a lucky woman to a rich merchant household. My father loved and doted on me. I also had 3 brothers. But I was still born as a woman. When my father passed away, no matter how hard I studied or how good I was at managing the money the family business brought in, my father never recognized me as someone to who he would leave his fortune. When he died, he left it all to my brothers, who even to this day are so busy fighting against each other for that fortune. By now they had probably forgotten that I even existed or that they even had a sister. Still, I refused to be some weak little lady that will have to spread her legs for some fat and ugly merchant. So I started my own business. After all, living in Braavos, there was one thing that is always in demand but never enough supply. That was ships. Even my father had to wait in line when he wanted a new ship, and even then it would usually arrive a couple of days later than experienced. My business started like any other. I opened a workshop and tried to talk with some merchants to sell them ships. But like always, my gender got in my way. Even offering them half the market price, they wouldn't accept. That was when the Iron Bank noticed my talents and decided to use me. Unlike others who only saw my gender, the Iron Bank saw me more than that and invested heavily in my business. The ships that came out of the workshop were not only less than half the price in the market when sold to them, but they were also a level higher than them. No one knew my name, nor did they sing me praises. But it was an undeniable fact that I am the best shipmaker in Braavos. After all, I was making ships for the Iron Bank. Of course, this was all secret. The Iron Bank was the strongest bank in all of Essos. The other banks were just credit men, loan sharks, compared to them. But recently I had learned that I might not be as smart as I like to think I am. True, there were faults in every person and no one was perfect. I too accept my faults. But that guy, no, that monster. He stripped me of everything I had. It all started 1 year ago, after that first initial deal. He came and got me to make some cheap ships for him. But he wasn't satisfied with only that. After some time, a number of my workers started dying in random ways. Some of them even went to work for other workshops that would pay them better. I tried to keep them here with some enticing offers, but soon, I started losing money and even had to take some loans from the Iron Bank. But even then I was still losing money. My workers all left and even those who were loyal to me died mysteriously. Then someone bought all my debts from the Iron Bank, and then he called in the collateral and took my company, he took my workers, my legacy, and then he hired 1,000 shipbuilders to build him an armada, and then I only became another supervisor in my own company. That certain someone who took everything from me is Arthur Frey, or as he is known now as Arthur Redhawk. In only 1 year he had become one of the most powerful men in Braavos. Currently, the only organizations that could challenge him in political power were the Iron Bank and the Guild Union of the Sea Lord. He had a fleet of 350 ships, 300 of them for trade, and 50 to protect these trades. He also got himself 50 personal guards. 300 guards for his business, 100 accountants, 350 ship captains, 3,000 sailors. He had become a powerful man in his own right. Also, the person I suspected killed my workers was him. After all, he didn't get rich just because he had 350 ships. No, he got rich because when he came in there were other merchant businesses. There was competition amongst them and only the best could survive. Then they started dying in random and mysterious ways, like one of them died while walking and a vase was dropped in his head. Another slipped and fell into the canals, drowning to death. There was also this who got killed by his victim when he tried to rape someone, and they left a gap in the trade. Then conveniently Arthur, Redhawk came in to just nicely fill in the gaps. That reeked of foul play. Even if there was no proof, there was obviously an incentive that pointed straight at him as the biggest benefactor from these people's deaths. As those thoughts raged in my mind, I noticed that I had arrived at my destination. In front of me stood a large 3-floored mansion with a large iron fence around it. The mansion grounds also had a large front garden with flowers and trees. The place was littered with guards patrolling the surroundings. It was irritating to think about it, but each of them was loyal to Arthur. Or more correctly, loyal to his gold. They said that he paid the best in all of Braavos, even the normal servants got paid 3 gold a year. So he had definitely bought their loyalty. As I walked to the front gates, one of the guards looked at me. Bet they were surprised. After all, there had been no notification of my arrival here. I wanted to take the owner of this place by surprise. But unlike I expected, the guard only nodded in my direction. Lord Redhawk has been expecting you, my lady. Damn it. This was what I hated about Arthur Redhawk, he always knew what was happening. Like a little fucking creep. He knew way too much about everyone and everything. Taking a deep breath, I calmed myself down. This wasn't too surprising. Arthur Redhawk might be a scumbag, but he wasn't incompetent. But I was prepared this time. I remembered the aggressive approach he made during our first deal. Or as he called it, blackmail. Let's see how he will like some of his own medicine.